Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that. A few technical issues this afternoon. Oh, has everybody got their speakers off, please? Everybody to off. Okay, afternoon. So, Place Scrutiny Committee today, the 19th of March 2026. Thank you for everybody for attendance. First item of the agenda is apologies for absence.
We've got apologies from Jackie Strong with Sue McConnell here as substitute, Tudor Thomas with Peter Strong as substitute, Martin Grokert with Tony Easton as substitute, and Thomas Davis with Martin Newell as substitute.
That's lovely. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything they wish to declare, or are we ready to say as or when? As and when? That sounds good to me. Thank you. Right, item 3. Public open forum. We need Rob back to his position of technical wizard, as we have a video from Justine Johnson. 1 second, everybody.
Hello everybody, it's Justine Johnson here, campaign to keep Goldwire Lane open with other people. I'd just like to make some observations about the recent report and other documentation. The Town Council unanimously agreed it should stay open. Abbeyfield residents were not in favour of it being closed. We've had over 334 signatures across 2 petitions, all agreeing it should stay open. The official consultation from Monmouthshire County Council had 241 people fill it in. 222 were against its closure, 14 said yes and 5 said maybe. Having read the report, we're very disappointed at the lack of acknowledgement given to this large number of people and would have hoped that democracy would have prevailed. Councillor Maybe stated that 11 people at Home Forge House wanted it closed in a previous meeting. What of the other 77.6%? All agree safety is important for all residents, but we believe this is achievable, flattening out the road and pavements and putting in bollards down one side, a bit like Maryport Street in Usk. 229 properties on our estate. Restricting vehicle access has meant a potential of 50% increase in traffic down Somerset Road. This is a bottleneck and leads on to the Wanstow Road, which now has a T-junction again with a pedestrian crossing directly in front of it, which is slowing traffic down, some say very dangerous, and causing queuing at peak times. We used to have a roundabout which kept the traffic flowing and was flowing. Goldware Lane stayed dry during Storm Bert, 24th of November 2024, and the Wanstow Road was closed, leaving us with no official way out, highlighting the importance of 2 exits. We also had a police incident about a year ago that stopped us exiting down Somerset Road. The ETRO, except for access sign, does not say where to, put in place on the 25th of October 2024. Google Maps still sends you down the lane. Does this not confuse drivers? Does it not invalidate the experiment, as does removing the traffic apparatus and reinstating it weeks apart? Having checked the driver numbers, they are more consistent with the weather than any other factor. The well-tagged consultation on which the lane features for pedestrianisation saw 241 people filling it in over 2 consultations. So changes to the Wanstow Road were made with as little as 0.52% of the Monmouth population being involved. So how effective is your consultation process? Poor, I'd say. Please put a consultation through my letterbox. Both active travel consultations were either in COVID or just coming out of it, which would not have shown normal activity on the roads. Many were furloughed or working from home or simply not working. Let's now talk safety. Now more traffic is going down Somerset Road. We have to acknowledge there are blocks of flats with children playing out, evidenced by the ramps and football nets. We now have bikes coming up the lane that were not allowed before, weaving around the pedestrians. Elizabeth Stone died in a collision with Stuart McGinn on the corner of Somerset Wannistow Road, and yet it's hardly mentioned in the consultation. It was the 18th of the 6th, 21, or given any real importance as shown by the less than satisfactory pedestrian cycle ways now on the Wannistow Road, Drybridge Street. Just a sign which is very high up in the air, no colour coding. There is a cycle on the road, but it's halfway up, no colour coding or designated area for either. Yet we are told in the consultation that it is normal to see children playing out, but on the other hand, repeatedly we are told about the vulnerability of pedestrians now on Goldwire Lane. How safe should we have to make people on the main road out of our estate, which is Goldwire Lane, in a northerly direction that has been in operation for 300 years? Do pedestrians themselves not have to take some care not to stand too close to the cars that are leaving the junction, that may involve some slight rollback due to the camber of the road as they take their foot off the brake and accelerate forward? Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe we have any other public participation. Okay, so now we can go on to who would like to speak, I suppose. So item 4 is prohibition of driving except for access, Goldwire Lane, Monmouth, to scrutinise the consultation options regarding Goldwire Lane, Monmouth. Now, I just thought I'd make it clear, because I don't know if everybody caught it, that the accident in which Justine was referring to, where a person got killed, was on the exit onto Wannistow Road. So it's not Goldwire Lane, but it was exit out onto Wannistow Road, which is where currently traffic is being pushed to. So it's not the actual lane we're actually discussing, but it's where we're forcing traffic, or where the current option is to push the traffic currently. Okay, I hope that makes sense, because it was a little unclear there. Okay, so hands up, anybody who wants to go. Oh, sorry, I should say, I do apologise, yes. It's presentation first from the Cabinet member, Catherine Maybe, Councillor Catherine Maybe.
Sorry, I'll be with you in a minute. I'm just trying to get my slides up. Thank you. I've done it. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Lovely. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give a bit of context and explain why we've taken the approach that we have. And I think for anyone who doesn't know Monmouth well, it's just helpful, I think, to see the map of it, to explain it. So you can see in this picture, Goldwire Lane. I'm going to have my pointer as well, if I can, so I can show you there. If you go along there, that's a one-way street. And then the red bit to the right there is the bit that we're talking about. So that's like a narrow, it's a strange loop, Goldwire Lane. So it turns right there, and it's that red bit that this traffic order relates to. And the lane also then bends left and goes across a little old Humpty-Back bridge over the ditch. The town ditch runs all the way along the back there. And what's interesting is that this whole area here of Overmono is a big residential area. And that little humpback bridge over the ditch, and then that walk, that little route into town, is the one kind of pedestrian access. And the old road, which Mrs. Johnson rightly refers to, has been clearly an old lane that has been walked down for a long time. Obviously not driven down for 300 years, but has been an access for a long time down there. So that's why it's a funny shape. But the main thing that really struck me is that leads across the ditch to all of this residential area. The exit that we recommend for vehicles is a normal road, which is that blue bit, normal size road, Somerset Road, which then comes down to Wonistow Road, from where you can turn right to go into town or to go on to the Overmonish School. You can turn left to go up to the industrial estate or back to the link road to come back round to the A40. So the residents who were campaigning against it, I believe, largely live in this bit here, and rather than nobody on the other side has been involved in that. So that's the discussion that's been going on. Oh, my map hasn't come up there for some reason. That's a shame. Oh, I had a big map that's gone there. Never mind, going back to this, when you look at this one, what really struck me is when you go across that little ditch, there's loads and loads of footpaths linking all of these housing estates. There's lots and lots of residential estates there, lots of children coming to school, etc. And they all, basically, there's that one access for walking into school. Otherwise, you'd have to go all the way around and down the main road on each side. So that was just really a different perspective on it from just thinking about the motorists that live on that one section there. So why did we intervene? I was doing an advice surgery. It seems ages ago now. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. An elderly residents came to see me at the community centre and said that they had a real problem. They walked down this road a lot, this section of the lane. They often have, on walking frames, mobility scooters, etc., and there just isn't room for the cars as well. And it's dangerous, and a lot of them are hard of hearing, etc., etc. And I've got put in those two pictures that gives you a sense of how narrow it is. The pavement at one end is too narrow for wheelchairs, for mobility scooters, for prams even, and for walking frames. So people have to walk into the middle of the road. The residents I spoke to said, please do something about this. Please, can you reduce the number of cars on it, because it's just not safe for us. And there's a lot of elderly people, and as I say, that plus all the children coming, and the pedestrians from further away. There's lots of elderly people in the two blocks just at the top of Goldwire Lane. And the community centre that we were at is actually just around the corner, the community centre and the church, and then walking on into town. Near misses were reported to me, and minor accidents with cars, including one example of somebody with whose disability scooter got caught under the wheels of the car. So that's really, that just shows you usually it's pedestrians getting out the way of the car, but that shows you how narrow it is in that picture. So that's why we did something about it, and I got a joint letter to follow up that request. So it wasn't just out of nowhere. It was following up an actual request. So when we looked into it more, and I brought it to the traffic team to talk about what can we do, we saw that actually on this little section of lane, there are very few properties that needed direct access, but lots of cars were using it as a shortcut. And when we looked at it, we realised that this was dangerous for the pedestrians in 3 different ways, actually. Obviously to the people walking or wheeling along the lane itself, but also if you look at the lower photograph there, that's actually on Drybridge Street, where if you come down Goldwire Lane by car, you pull out into the traffic, and anybody trying to cross from pavement to pavement is then having to deal with going out into the road in front of the car that's sitting there waiting to exit, or go around behind it. And there was one example reported to me of a car then backing up into that person. So it's dangerous for people crossing on that pavement as well as for people going down Goldwire Lane. And then also to traffic on this street, because it's not really a place where you expect to have cars pulling out. It's quite close to the roundabout and there's poor visibility. And then when looking at it, we thought, well, going back to the first picture, oh, my map's come up now, interesting. Going back to the first picture, you can see the blue line is a normal road, Somerset Road, which is fine for vehicles. So it's not like there isn't another route, that onto Wanstead Road, and then pedestrians and mobility scooters and cycles down there. So we thought, well, that makes sense. It makes everybody safer. And that map I wanted to show you was just showing you the network of footpaths in this huge residential area, well, huge for Monmouth, residential area, to show all the footpaths that kind of link up to that little bridge, that walking route, and that route into town. So it just shows what the potential for that to be a good walking route, as well as the people who are currently using it. Shows how important it is. Obviously then to reduce the need for cars and traffic congestion. So it all kind of started to make sense. So we did the experimental TRO, was started in October 2024, that's right, isn't it? I haven't got that date. Yeah, that was right. To see what would happen, what would be the impact if we restricted it to access only. So the cars that were allowed down that road are only the ones that needed direct access to the properties on that little section. And what we found from the monitoring was overall there was a reduction in vehicle traffic both on the Goldwell Lane and on Somerset Road. So some of the worries that came up, which quite understandable, and Mrs. Johnson raised them in that video. The first one of those was, what do we do if Wanstead Road floods? Because it's a flood-prone area, as we know, unfortunately. And we needed to, obviously, emergency vehicles use whatever access they can in such a situation. But we've made it very clear, we've confirmed that if Wanstead Road is flooded and Goldwell Lane isn't, then that restriction would not apply. So people could then use that. So basically, that was the biggest concern that people had. However, when you have a very severe flood, I do need to remind people that they're asked not to drive unless essential, because stranded cars really cause a hazard and take up time from rescue services. So a lot of the floods that we get are like 24 hours, whatever, and people are asked really not to drive unless it's an emergency. So we would not expect the normal amount of traffic in such a situation. But if it was to occur and to sit there for a long time on Wanstead Road, then people could use this exit. And I think people do know that. They use it anyway in that situation. Actually, in the most recent flood, unfortunately, Drybridge Street itself was flooded, so you couldn't have used that bit of Goldwell Lane anyway. The whole area was so much worse, the flood, than we've had before. And then the other big worry that people had was, are you going to end up with traffic congestion on Somerset Road and pulling out into Wanstead? And our monitoring has showed that hasn't occurred, and there's been no evidence of it happening. And as I say, the monitoring indicated a slight reduction even in the traffic on Somerset Road. I got very excited about this and said, oh, people are walking now, and I was informed. I don't think it's statistically robust enough, Catherine, to assume that. But at least it shows us there wasn't a sudden increase in traffic on Somerset Road, and a whole new problem. So what we're trying to achieve here is a safe, quiet lane for walkers and wheelers, safe in the knowledge that they have priority and they don't have to jump out of the way of vehicles. But also thinking about increased freedom for non-drivers, including children and some very elderly. People who wouldn't walk or wheel and perhaps wouldn't go out at all if they didn't feel safe. So hopefully then more people from the surrounding areas, including the Overmont residential areas I showed you, would then be using this as a pedestrian route, further reducing traffic and improving air quality. And then I've just put in a couple of quotes there. Somebody said, I use this almost every day. I've always thought priority should be given to pedestrians, with cycles and mobility bikes allowed to use it. I don't see a need for cars to use it as a shortcut. At the moment, pedestrians have to move to let vehicles pass. And then here was another example. One lady who's nearly blind and has to use a walker was seen to have a car in front of her and 3 cars behind because she had to go out into the road. It's too narrow. She couldn't be on the side of the pavements and there wasn't room for cars to squeeze past her. So this poor old lady was, being really pressurised with these cars on both sides of her, which I don't think would happen if it was access only and you've just got the occasional car. It's the quantity of cars. and the assumption then that cars have priority, which people do still assume, I think. And then an elderly resident who corresponded with me, who's in her 90s, said, "Thank you for listening to the pedestrians who have to use mobility scooters and walkers to get to the shops." And I just had to throw this one in at the end, a quote from Alf Dubs, that our society will be judged on how we treat our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Okay, right. So we've moved on from that. We don't have anything else to present, or do we? Do you wish to present anything, Graham, or...?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, right, so we can move into questions and etc. now. Who would like to have a chat? Who would like to ask a question, have a thought? I'm looking at Emma, because no doubt Emma was going to say something. So, yes or no? Whoever?
I can speak first. I thought Prof. Martin might want to speak first. As his ward.
I'm trying to, sorry.
Okay, so C15, which is, I don't know.
Just any hands up in the usual.
Okay, so Emma, I was trying to see who's got their hands up.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Obviously, I walk past this lane several times a week, and it's not just a lane; it's a vital walking corridor, and I witness hundreds of children using it to and from school every day, and I have noticed since this is implemented, it does seem so much quieter. I am concerned because I know a lot of the consultees mentioned a shared space, but you can't really engineer anything into such a narrow corridor that you can't make the pavements wider, which is one of the requests. So it's a foot wide at one end, and there's a blind bend as you're trying to cross Drybridge Street, which is how I managed to get myself hit by a vehicle, a driver, when I was trying to cross it, which he'd reversed into me once. So yeah, it isn't safe, and so seeing the numbers of vehicles greatly reduced has as I felt it a lot safer, and I'm only just walking across this lane and witnessing other people's use of it. What I wanted to ask was, I was concerned about the lack of children's voices in the consultation. I didn't feel that was really very well, and so I was asking, did they have a voice in the consultation, and if we were to consider reopening go-by lanes to through traffics, would a formal risk assessment be carried out? Because if the lanes, hazards, narrow pavements and blind corners and the heavy pedestrian use has already been highlighted, would we be liable if a collision then occurred, knowing that we've drawn back on the safety things that we'd seen would benefit and reduced the chance of casualties? Would we then be liable if something was to go awry going forward? Yeah.
Ultimately, any collision happening on the public highway involves vehicles, pedestrians, or a multiple of those. Ultimately, it's normally driver error, pedestrian error. There are sort of instances where the highway environment can be taken into account, but ultimately, 90% of the time there is a sort of an issue with the user, the end user, rather than the environment, put it that way.
Yeah, because we know there are hundreds of children that use this route every single day, and children make errors, and that error shouldn't cost them their
Absolutely.
lives. They're going to be chatting and not looking where they're going. They're going to be on their phones, and so they're going to be chatting with friends. The reduction in vehicles are going to reduce the chances of there being a collision in this area. We know that. We're trying to implement safety implements to reduce that. So if we withdraw that and then there's an incident, are they going to say, well, you knew that you could have done something to reduce the chances of it? Do we have to write a risk assessment if we decided to draw back on these changes?
I don't think a risk assessment is necessary, but certainly a follow-up report indicating why the decision has been taken, if that is the case, which would sort of discuss all the potential outcomes of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Consultation, can you?
Yeah, I can answer a bit on that. It's an interesting question about how far should you go on a consultation about something like that. We've talked about it a lot. Obviously, we do so much on road safety interventions across the county. If we did a whole Monmouth consultation on each little change, it would be a massive area of work, I think. On this occasion, what we did was we consulted initially with the people who lived on the section that was directly affected. We didn't, but in fact, the people who objected when we put out into the public the TRO were people who were not specifically individually contacted, were they? It's just that they were made aware of it, which tended to be the drivers along that one bit. And I did think, when I was thinking, the point is well made about, all the people who've answered, it's not all of them, but a lot of the people who've answered were against it, though most of them were saying it's because of the flooding. So, it's not a referendum, and that we addressed each one of the objections, which was flooding or why can't you make it a shared space. Those were the two reasons given. But if we were to do something that went further and talk to everybody who was affected, we really should consult with all of those residential areas beyond the town ditch, beyond Clouthie as well. But it would be a huge piece of work. I did think about that, and I thought it was a bit over the top, to be honest with you. But I don't know, if we were to reopen it, we probably should do a much wider consultation.
Okay, thank you. Just Robert has something.
Sorry, it's completely unrelated to the discussion. It's just Councillor McConnell just made a really good suggestion, which I can't believe I didn't think of. Because the cameras aren't working in the chamber for those on Teams, contrary to what we would normally say, if everyone who's on Teams could put their camera on, then at least the people at home can see who's speaking. Which, apologies for not thinking of that myself. That's irrelevant to the discussion. It's just on the luckily, the live stream is working, so people at home can see everything, just not those of you on Teams.
There's see double of us. I'm not sure that's a good thing. Right, okay. Moving on. So, Martin, Councillor Newell, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And as everyone knows, I'm actually the ward member for Goldwine Lane. So, of course, I'm here to represent my residents' views and sort of... just a couple of items before I get on to my main points. Are we able to go back to the second slide where we had the red and the green and the yellow? Because there's a public footpath which has been missed off that map, which runs alongside the Riverside Hotel and runs directly into the Cloudy Estate. I used that when I used to work at the Riverside Hotel. It's perfectly safe. So there is an alternative public footpath into that estate which has been missed. And I don't know why it's been omitted, but it has been omitted. If you could bring that slide up, that'd be great, whoever's in charge of the slides. It's actually safer than...
I'm just trying to find it. It is actually private lands, Martin, because we did...
But it's a public access, public footpath, and it's adopted by MCC.
I don't think it is. I think it belongs to the hotel, because we did ask about that.
Yeah, it's fenced off for the public to use, and it goes straight through to the housing estate. It's not you're thinking of the thing that goes through to the car park. For the record, I've lived here and worked here all my 54 years. I know this place like the back of my hand.
Sorry.
There we are, thank you. Imagine you're going down the Green Road, you'll get into the entrance by the St Thomas's Road roundabout. If you turned right 150, 200 yards maybe, I'm not sure, but there's actually another footpath.
Easier one.
There we are, that's a better picture. Yeah. There's another footpath that runs adjacent, exactly the same line, into the Cloudy I think it's Capper's Place estate. It's wide enough. I used to use it every day when I was working at the garage and at the Riverside Hotel. So there is an alternative safe route that won't add any time to anyone's distance, that can be used by wheelchair users, those with disabilities or anything, young children or anything as well. So pedestrians don't have to use Goldwire Lane. So I just need to make that point, that was omitted from that map. The other side as well, a lot of this committee, a decision seems to be made on anecdotal evidence instead of taking a look at the evidence we have in front of us. I have evidence from consultation, from Monmouth Town Council, and from all sorts. That's really what we should be taking a note of. Not what we think is our own views in here. It's what our residents and our local community councils want. That's another view. The fact that there's been 2 near misses on Goldwire Lane, well, Goldwire Lane has probably been there 150 years. I don't know how old the houses are. But sadly, we've had a fatality on the alternative route. That fatality will outweigh 2 near misses, as unfortunate as all those near misses are. Of course we want to be safe, but as someone who knows this area, if we go back to a picture of Goldwire Lane as well, it was built for traffic when it was built all those years ago. Things have changed. So it doesn't mean we have to close this lane. What it means, it needs to be altered. Okay, we look around Monmouthshire, there's all sorts of examples of shared spaces, whether it's with pinpointed lines where pedestrian use, but they then can move into the road safely if there's no traffic, or move to the side if there's a car coming, and vice versa. There's ways to adjust it. We don't need to close it, we need to adjust it. And also a town councillor. We had a Monmouth Town Council. Now, we had different views, but as a town council, you vote as a one. You make a representation to the town council. And I quote, "This is Monmouth Town Council's recommendation. In the absence of a permanent alternative exit from Goldwire Lane that is not impacted by flooding and in recognising the current restrictions on trial are not a successful solution." These are town councillors that live in the town and use this road more than anyone. Monmouthshire County Council should consider making the exit from Goldwire Lane onto Drybridge Street a safe shared space with appropriate signage, changes to road service and traffic calming measures to ensure the safety of all users. So Monmouth Town Council had a very robust... So again, as a town council, I'm bringing their views to committee. Consultation. Now, it's all well and good saying we've spoken to 100 people and 90%, I can make up figures. I spoke to 100 people in the post office, 99 of them don't. I've got no evidence of that, so I can't use that. But what I do have is the MCC's results from the consultation process. Okay? 227 people who answered the consultation disagreed with the closing. Okay, some of them agree, 5 agreed somewhat, but 13 agree it should be closed. Now, if we're going to ignore Monmouth Town Council, if we're going to ignore this consultation, why are we bothering? Why don't we just get rid of consultations altogether? This is what the residents, our council taxpayers, the users of this lane want. Now, we can't please all the people all of the time, but we have a duty to listen to their views and not enforce our own. That's my view. Okay? Now, in the spirit, I want this road open. I want to work together with Monmouthshire County Council to make it safe. It's great that we can have access if there is flooding or an emergency, but who's going to action that? Who's going to monitor whether or not traffic is really genuinely going there for access? There's no way of absolutely monitoring this. People in that we're a war that we need our cars. Okay, I've got anecdotal evidence of being queued up for over 20 minutes going down the alternative route. So my question is, if I can we work together to find a way? I want the road to be safe. It's not fit for purpose as it is, but there has to be a way that we can work together to keep this road open, make sure it's safe for everyone. And that's really what I want to do as the ward member. And I'm just backing up my residents and the local town council. But I do thank the committee for all the work they've done. It's not a simple project. But anyway, thanks for that.
Okay. Sorry. There's anybody else? Graham, did you want to answer to any of that? No? Okay. Oh, Catherine does, right.
Sorry, I could just answer a couple of the points because I know the area really well too. Obviously, the Riverside Hotel, the other access, I did look at that because people had mentioned it. It is actually a private path, and I've actually had people come to me saying that they've had accidents walking down there because it's a narrow thing with some metal bits, and we can't make the hotel turn it into an access that would be safe for prams and mobility scooters. It's true that pedestrians could squeeze through there, but it's not an alternative for us to...
It's not squeezed.
It's not squeezed.
Just object to that. It's not squeezing through. It's a wide path. It's plenty wide enough, and I just think we're using words here that we shouldn't be using.
I'm only reporting back somebody who came to me and said that they'd actually... Can I finish it? They'd actually fallen on that path, and we did actually look at it to see if there's anything we could do to make it safer. This is some time ago, and I was told, well, it's a private... It belongs to the hotel. It's not really something that we can insist on. So I don't think it substitutes for that very direct route for people. I agree on consultations. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Just how far you go on everything that you do in terms of referendums. The thing with the consultation is not a referendum. What it does is make sure that people can come forward with what they're concerned about. And I think it worked from that point of view because people raised the issue about flooding. The majority of the people who came back and said, but what do we do in terms of flooding? So we've made very, very clear that that's not a problem. That if Wannistow Road is flooded, I've just kept this up for the minute so that anybody looking at it can understand. If there's a flood there, where I'm pointing to, but there isn't a flood here, then the point was that obviously drivers want to know that they can come out this way, and that was the point that was being made, wasn't it? In that last flood, actually, unfortunately, this whole street got flooded, but we hope very much that's not going to happen again. But we're making it really clear that issue is addressed, that in the case of a flood, people can exit that way. But also, as I said, the floods that we tend to have are... because it's all related to the Mono, which is such a fast reaction river, it tends to come up deep for a short period of time. So you're likely to have that blocked for like 24 hours or something at the most, often only 12 hours. And during that period of time, the request very much from the emergency services is please don't drive unless you absolutely need to, because cars get stranded. So it's not as if we have, like some towns on the Severn have, days and days of towns underwater and a long-term alternative route needed. So I felt that the consultation in addressing that concern did work. That was the main concern that people came up with. And the other main thing was saying, why can't we have this shared space? And it was something we looked at initially, and we thought, wouldn't that be nice? I think one of the campaign's pictures was a picture of looked like a street in the Netherlands, which, is a lovely... In the Netherlands, they've had like 30, 40 years of people getting used to the hierarchy on the roads where pedestrians have the top priority, followed by cycles, followed by cars. It takes a long time for behaviour to adjust to that, but it is a lovely vision. But you do need a wide enough space if there's any quantity of vehicles. And the problem on Goldwire is that it's just not wide enough for that to be the case. So cars would end up stacking up if they did give priority to pedestrians and cyclists. So we did look at it, but it just doesn't work on that little bit. I'm not sure if I've answered all of your points, but those are the main... Oh, the town council. I did look at that, and I was worried about that, but it was right back in, I think that meeting was January 2025, and at that point everyone was it? I think Oh.
February 25, I beg your pardon.
I thought it was 25, yeah. And so people were, I did talk to some town councillors and said, what some of the other town councillors said, I didn't realise that, you were also concerned and didn't like this idea. And the
Sorry
response...
to interrupt, but
The town council we come here as one voice.
it's
Individual
sorry?
opinions.
yeah, well, actually,
Just a point of clarification. Yeah,
You
thank you.
don't want me to mention what other town councillors have said? Okay,
no,
fine, I
because sorry, I'll interrupt there. Because it was done as a town council, as a unit, and now individual voices on that from the town council is not. That's not how it was done. Okay. Thank you.
I was trying to clarify what the reasoning was, and I understood it was also about the concern about flooding, and they thought they'd understood that you can't, there's no exit
right.
in case of flooding.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maybe. Right, so I believe Councillor Garrett has joined in. I would assume he's got his hand up and he would like to speak. As he's not a member of the committee, I'll hold fire to after he's spoken unless any of the committee members would like to speak. So, Councillor Garrett, sorry, you're going to have to go in line for Councillor Sue McConnell.
Thank you. Just listening to and having read the papers and listening to the debate today, so we talk about convenience, and I think Goldwell Lane has been a convenient shortcut for quite a long time. Convenience is another word for desire lines, and which is used quite often when we're talking about routes and paths and things. And this is clearly a popular and well-used route for pedestrians coming right across this area from the housing behind into town. So it's really a question of weighing up those two interests. I understand the concerns that by taking away a route out that you increase the traffic, but the monitoring seems to. So Councillor New was talking about looking at evidence. The monitoring suggests that there is no increase in. It's interesting that there's no significant increase in the traffic on Somerset Street. I know the area quite well. I was a town councillor there for a while, so I've walked around there many a time. So it is. So it's really weighing up the facility to drivers to give them the convenient shortcut against the benefits to pedestrians of giving them the convenience of walking in a straight line. And given that pedestrians expend more energy and take more time getting from A to B, it would seem sensible, even laying aside the safety issues, it would seem sensible to give priority to pedestrians here, which is why I would support the proposal to close it to vehicles other than access. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sensing your friends to your left would like to have a word. Councillor John Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I had the privilege of helping a person come out of Goldwell Lane several months ago. That my partner Angela Sanders and I were on a call, and she was in quite some distress, and we had to stop the car and help her enter the main road. And the cars behind were quite offish, really. I asked them why they were travelling down the road. Well, we've done it for years. I said, well, haven't you seen the signs? That doesn't mean anything to us, really. So I'm just mentioning that people on scooters and walking are in some distress and quite a problem with the cars backing up behind them on Goldwell Lane, and that was an unbelievable operation that we sort of came across. You know, we happened to be in the right place at the right time. She was quite distressed.
I thought I saw you on the picture there.
I would certainly agree with the proposition of closing this to pedestrian use in the future.
I thought I spotted you on that photo. There you go. Right, Councillor Garrett, I believe your hand is up. Unless we've got anybody... Oh, hang on, Councillor Garrett, you can't. You've got to go after Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I can understand the argument with regard to pedestrians and the reason that that's been put forward. But I do think that in the circumstances, in view of the consultation response, that the alternative route by the hotel should be explored. I appreciate this is a private route, but it does actually give the pedestrian and wheelchair access. I appreciate there must be a right of way across it, because otherwise it wouldn't have continued in that particular way. With regard to it being private, I think, there is a possibility of negotiating with the hotel and, suggesting that if the council looked at measures to make it safe, presumably it's only in one particular area, and provided a grant to support a sort of a pedestrian safety grant to support that, then that would be another option. And I do think it is important to listen to the consultation responses that you've got back on it. So I'm not quite clear that the alternative option has been fully explored. And I know, for example, in Chepstow, there is actually the alleyways that go down from the main car park near the library. They're privately owned, and I did raise the issue about a bit of slipperiness there, and was told it was private, and that was the end of the matter. But I think that the council could be a little bit more adventurous in terms of their negotiation with people. The other point I'd like to make is that I think this thing about no access, obviously you can't actually, except for residential access. You've said, oh well, obviously during emergencies people can use it, but that's not clear from the signage, and people won't necessarily know that. So I don't think you're not going to put an extra little sign, oh, by the way, during flooding you can ignore this. So I'm not quite clear that all of the options have been fully covered in view of the consultation response that you've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now, sorry, I didn't spot Peter Strong. I did, yeah, he was hiding underneath a little thing that came up. Well, I was just going to let Councillor Strong have his moment. Councillor Strong.
Thank you. Yeah, wasn't hiding. I came up to Goldwire Lane last week to have a really good look. Well, really to remind myself, because I knew about it already, and I made quite a lot of notes. I won't go through them all because I really just to say that my observations were very much in accordance with the points that Councillor Maybe made. What I was expecting to see today was strong arguments against the points that were made in the report and against the specific points that Councillor Maybe had made. And I've seen very little in that direction. I've heard this talk of shared spaces. I'm not a fan of shared spaces. A share between a pedestrian and a motor car is not a great share. We have, under very different circumstances, much wider area, a shared space in Caldecott, and it's not great. Motorists don't behave in the way that they should do, and the danger therefore is not to the motorist, but to the pedestrian. I was looking into this when this occurred in Caldecott, and it's a few years back now, probably 4 years back now. But I noted at the time that the Royal National Institute of the Blind were not at all keen on shared spaces, very much for the reasons that I have. On alternative pedestrian routes, it might not be a great deal more for those that are fit and healthy, but the people I saw walking along Goldwire Lane were elderly, and one or two certainly infirm. It was a struggle for them to get through a direct route. A longer route would have probably been beyond their capabilities. I do agree, though, that better signage is needed, not necessarily an extra sign, permanent sign saying you can use it if there's flooding. I mean, I'm sure that would be a police matter. If you got flooding, I would imagine the police would be out there pretty quickly anyway to deal with traffic, and they could deal with that. But you do need a better sign, I think, to make sure that motorists who are used to using that area and are not necessarily always as observant as they should be, but it is restricted access, and where that access is to and from. And then just finally, the default position is really stated by the statutory legislation that we have a statutory obligation to plan for and deliver continuous improvements in active travel. And therefore the default position is to close that lane unless there are compelling arguments against it. And I do have to say, while there are points on both sides, I haven't really seen compelling arguments that outweigh the need to follow the statutory obligations. So thanks for listening.
Okay, shall I now, you would like to go through, okay, Councillor Maybe and Graham Kinsella, officer, would like to speak on some of those comments from the last two, please.
Yeah, so in response to the highway signage that is currently in place, any sign that is erected on public highway has to be prescribed within the TSRGD, which is the regs that prescribe highway signage. The signs that are in place are a prohibition of driving except for access. There's no other signs within the arsenal that we can put in place out there that enacts the restriction. So it's the signs that are there are appropriate and fit for purpose in terms of indicating the restriction to the motorist.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Brown, you have your mic out. Did you want it? Oh, sorry. You're right. Okay. All right. Sorry, Councillor Maybe you wanted to speak.
I just wanted quickly to show you that the comment about the Riverside Hotel, we have honestly looked at it. I took seriously that point when it was originally made. If I can... Oh, gosh, I'm so useless at sharing this. Teams. Okay. Here we are. And then share. Thank you. Okay. Just to show you, that is the car park of the Riverside Hotel, and the little alleyway that people can nip through round the back of the car park is down there. I think that's what Councillor Newell was referring to. As you can see, it's not very wide, and it goes through then a dark bit, and then you have to sort of wiggle around the back to get out. It isn't really an alternative. It doesn't give anything like the same option, but I can see why you might have used it as a shortcut as a able-bodied pedestrian in the past. That's the way you meant, isn't it, Riverside?
I completely disagree with what you just said. It's perfect.
Mike.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor, maybe my apologies. It is the site, and I completely disagree. That photo's at an angle anyway. I've walked there hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. There is perfectly adequate pathway through, and there's paths the either side that you go right, and there's a path at the side of the houses as well. If you can Google map all the length of that, I think you'll find. And like colleagues have said, even if it's not 100% suitable now, there's something that the county council could do to make that 100% suitable for pedestrians to use safer. It's actually a safer route than because you can get to the houses on Cloudy without even have to cross any main road. That's actually a much safer route for pedestrians, in my view. Thank you.
Okay, still on. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Bryn. You all right there? You were smiling. I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, I just think you'd need another pedestrian crossing if you did that, because otherwise you'd have to walk all the way back. There
is one just up the road from there. There you go. So you're not thinking on that one. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Garrett is shaking his head in dismay now. I'm sorry, can we keep it professional, guys? Councillor Dimmock, you would like to speak. And then Councillor Maybe smiling as well. And be aware, everybody, please happy.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lisa Dimmock for Portskeurt. So I'm based in the south of the county, obviously visited Monmouth, but I'm not particularly aware of this location. Looking at the report and the data that's attached to the report, there's no times. It's a bit of a weak interpretation of the traffic data that's been captured. Nothing about peak times, both 2024 and 2025. Obviously, I can see a considerable drop in the number of vehicles, but it doesn't really give you a feel for what's been going on throughout the day. Obviously, there's been a lot of feedback on the consultation, but it seems that we haven't taken into account a lot of people that are opposing these ideas. But I hear what colleagues are saying about the need for safe walking, access, cycling, scooting, or whatever people use if they don't need to rush around in a car, I suppose. Is there any possibility of bollards for a walking and scooting area? You know, what's the width of this road? Because obviously recently Monmouthshire Council turned a major route into my ward one way to extend a footpath to make it walking and cycling active travel route. And yes, there's been a lot of people upset because obviously change is very difficult for people to get used to. But is there any possibility of this for this section of road? Just from my understanding, really. And to obviously allow vehicle access at the same time, if it's one way.
It is one way. So the direction of travel of the one way on Goldwell Lane is from down to Drybridge Street. Yeah. So it's down the lane. Unfortunately, there is a sort of margin strip footway currently there. It wouldn't be possible to increase the width of that and maintain vehicular traffic at the same time.
Okay. I do have to say, I don't think proper consideration has been given with regards to the feedback on the consultation. I will admit that, but thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. Councillor Brown, have you got your hand up again or not?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the alternative route by that hotel, I would have thought if it is wide enough to have sort of a wheelchair or a scooter, and obviously we haven't got any measurements, or if you could negotiate with the hotel to make it slightly wider, I would have thought that that was a safer pedestrian route because it's basically, it's gated off and you haven't actually got any vehicles going along there at all. So I don't think that option and, the circumstances of the safety of that option have been properly looked at. I appreciate it's a bit more difficult because of the fact that it is privately owned, but it looks like there's quite a lot of space in that car park. And if it needs to be widened slightly, it would only be by a marginal amount, which presumably it looks like there's a bit of grass on that area, if I missed the photograph as well. So I think that should be looked at first before you decide on this particular option, because I think it looks a lot safer. You haven't got any traffic at all there. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Now, I believe the whole committee before me have spoken. Yes, everybody's happy. Right, Councillor Steve Garrett, I understand you'd like to speak as a guest.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure I'd be able to make the meeting because I had another meeting earlier, but it finished, so I was able to join. Thank you to Robert for sending me the link. I live in Town Ward. I'm the councillor for Over Mono, so literally across the road is my ward. I use that route regularly. Just for clarification, the accident that happened on Wanstow Road and Somerset Road was a pedestrian riding round the corner from Somerset Road who struck a pedestrian. She sadly passed away, and the cyclist was prosecuted. It was quite widely reported. Sadly, he took his own life as well. So 2 people died because of that incident. So just to put that into context, it was just literally across the road from where I live. A lot of people we spoke to at Captain, maybe myself at our surgery, elderly people living in the flats, people who live in Elstob Way and Carbon, they use this route regularly. My understanding is before I became a councillor, it was possibly considered to be a viable active travel route. And plans I think were in place, but then they changed, and the Williamsfield Lane route was then built and has just been completed. I think it's important to remember as well, this is a blind junction when you come out onto the road. You've got a roundabout to the right, you've got a pedestrian crossing to the left. And the reason I smiled earlier was because we've been, people who don't live in the area, talking about using the Riverside Hotel path, but when we saw the angle down the road, you've got the roundabout and then the crossing. It's quite a considerable walk for people to do. So the desire line, as Councillor McConnell said, will be naturally through Goldwire Lane. But even then, for those people that live in the area that drive regularly through there, pedestrians, desire line doesn't take them to the crossing, which is why I smiled, Councillor Lucas, because people still cross at that junction. They come out and they try and walk straight across the road. So often I have to stop to let people cross the road if they're already in the road. So they don't even walk the 20 yards to the crossing. So we need pedestrians to take more care. I think this is a public meeting. Hopefully people watching will appreciate that they should use the crossing, and walking from the Riverside Hotel to that crossing is not a route that anyone, I would think, is logically going to take. It's a considerable walk around, despite what people have said earlier. When we have flooding, before the recent flood, the brook has flooded twice since I've lived there, 2020 and 2024. The road is not passable in those conditions. If you drove your car through there, you're going to flood the engine, you're going to have a breakdown, you're going to have to be recovered and lose your car. So, and the council workers are at the top of the road, they block the road, the pumps work to take the water off into the Mono. Fortunately, last time it was the Mono that flooded and came the other way. Normally it's the brook coming from Kingswood Gate side. So again, it wouldn't be safe to go out of that way, as Councillor Maybe has already said, during a flood. But if there was a flood, as Councillor Maybe has said, that condition could then be removed for the period of time, and it's usually a period of maybe 10 to 12 hours that the water may remain until it's cleared. That's the experience I've got living in the area. So really, it's a question of safety. We've spoken to many elderly residents. Maybe some of them feel a bit intimidated that their voice hasn't been heard. But they're people that go to Tea Price when that hopefully reopens. They go to the coffee mornings there, the activities. They go across to St Thomas's Church. They use it as a route to town. So it is a vital route. It isn't entirely safe when you've got cars there, especially if you've got cars pushing you as you're walking along. So although I obviously haven't got a vote, I would say to members, if you haven't been to the area, I would just take account of the points. As you come out, you've got a roundabout, you've got a crossing, it's not very clear for drivers coming out. There's not a very good display, and I'd be interested to hear Graham's comments on the road safety aspects of the junction as well, because that hasn't been mentioned. About you've got people coming from the roundabout from the self-service station going along to Rockfield. They're having to slow down at the roundabout, but then also you've got pedestrians then sometimes mixing with traffic, not using the crossing. So from my point of view, it's a road safety issue. It's not a personal issue. I don't want to see anyone else hurt or injured in this area. Let's focus on the road safety aspects as well here. Thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me speak.
Okay, all right. So I've got. Graham, would you like to answer any of that point?
Yeah. So in respect of the sort of the highway alignment at the end of Goldwire Lane going on to Drybridge Street there, it is visibility is restricted. Given that, then in those instances, what we would expect the motorist to do is to drive to the prevailing highway conditions. So approaching those junctions at a slow speed, and being aware of their environment ultimately.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else before I have Martin? Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to finish off, if I'm allowed, just to thank Councillor Brown for her comments. I think you make some valid points about investigating the Riverside pathway. And I think as a committee, it's important that we do take on board our residents' views, not the anecdotal evidence that we all have. It's the legal consultation that we have and the town council's view as well. We have a duty here to represent our residents and their views and their wishes, the majority of their wishes. So I just want to make the recommendation that we're not ready yet to close this road. I think there's so much more work needs to be done on this particular project. It's nowhere near a finished project in my view. And I think it's a dereliction of duty if we just do this without investigating all of the comments that have been made at committee today, Chair. And we have to listen to our residents. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that one, I think, in a moment. Councillor Easton, did you wish to speak before I do?
Yeah, just a quickie, Chair. This is an experimental traffic order brought in 18 months ago. We're up to the 18-month period now. I'm concerned that we haven't sold, it sounds a very good scheme really, but we haven't sold this to the 200 and some odd objectors. Have we put enough mitigation measures in to cover those objectors who feel that there shouldn't be a closure at all? How can we convince them that there is a real need to close it? I can see some of this, I know the area fairly well. There is a need for control. But have we really cleared all the mitigation measures to make sure that it is the best way to do it? Because 227 objectors and only a few for it. So what has gone wrong in our consultation process? Really, that's what concerns me. I can see the need for this lane to be used less or whatever, but we've got to sell this to. It's not my residents. They've got to be sold to our constituents in that area. Is there anything else we can do? Can the experimental order be extended for 12 months to make sure that we answer those 227 or 227 objectors? Because they're a concern to me. I don't live in Monmouth, but I just see that as a concern.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Tony. Graham, would you like to answer any of that?
Yes, certainly. Within the body of the report, there is an appendix there which identifies all the comments that have been received, including officer responses on that, against each objection or comment that has been provided. So, everybody that has submitted comments in respect of the consultation will receive a copy of this report. That is the process that we follow in terms of making a traffic order.
Okay, thank you. So before we go back to those points, I'd like to have a few comments, please. All right. One of the things that I'm very much aware of, as you probably well know, I'm from Monmouth, it's my ward area. I grew up around there. I actually went to Overmonmouth School. I actually used to walk along through both Wannister Road and down through Goldwild to catch the bus from the bus station when I was knee-high to Grasshopper. So I do know the area intimately well, I'm afraid to say, from a long time. From that, I can happily say, as I've grown up and grown old and gone into my current profession, that when we talk about traffic and we're talking about poor visibility and blind spots, we have not long, in the last 4 years, had a highway code legal change where the pedestrian crossing the road has the right, not the car. So we've answered that already, technically. But also, when we think about that, when we are driving, and Graham also brought this up, you peep and creep is the phrase we use when we're teaching and explain to someone how to use the road system. Now, if we're saying that the junction is blind, then I've gotten used to everybody, we better stop driving everywhere, because pretty much every junction you go round of Monmouth or Monmouthshire, you're going to find there's blind junctions. That's a fact of life. And unfortunately, whether it's right or wrong, it comes down to the driver to make sure that they are knowing what they're doing. Likewise, does it come down, in my humble opinion, that as a pedestrian, which I often am, and also as a cyclist, as I often am, that I am responsible to know that I am safe. Now, I appreciate totally that there are those who are less fortunate than myself who might not be of the hearing or of the sight, and therefore needs special consideration. And I personally, and I'm aware of it, and I've watched the Goldwire Lane being used in very recent weeks, even as far as yesterday actually, that people are very considerate to those in need, and I really do feel that they are. You might like to interpret them to be pushing, but that's not what I've seen. They're being waiting and patient and quiet. And I've been down there when we've been working and going around talking to residents, and I'm aware of it. So whilst I totally agree that it's not ideal, my problem is that I feel we could look further into, and Graham said there isn't the room, but I question whether or not we could not make a small area like a pinch point, as we have at the top of Mono Street, where the pedestrian can have the moment of grace to choose whether they go through, or hopefully the car gives automatically, and they will, to the pedestrian or the wheeler or the person in the mobility scooter to go through first to get to the safety of getting into the wider part of the lane, and then making the lane safe and shared space, because there is room further up the lane for shared space. And when we talk about, and I take that as a possible option, which is where we go to Councillor Easton's point, which do we perhaps need to take this further afield, and Councillor Brown's point, where we need to perhaps look further and deeper into this. There's the other option of perhaps purchasing a little more of the land from the hotel, who, let's face it, love them, have been flooded out and not in the goodest place at the moment, might appreciate some help, that they would give us some land and negotiate some land. After all, we have just done that for Kingswood Gate, where we've talked about Winfield Lane, where we've just done the public pedestrian access through there, for the active travel access through there. That was down to us purchasing the land. That's the reason why it took so long to get going. It wasn't just because we couldn't do it, it was because it was a hold-up because of the land ownership. So all those things are very important. There was a network footpaths map shown in part of the slideshow earlier on. Now, the slide showed footpaths from all the Link Road housing estate, and that may be fine, but I know from walking in there that there's more and more direct access than just going down into that particular place on Goldwire Lane. They hop out at the bottom by the garage. So that doesn't quite follow up for me either. And when we talk about pedestrians coming out of the lane and crossing, yes, they do. And I've seen it many, many times, and I deal with it every day, probably half a dozen times a day. But I also know that the pedestrian overrides the car. And it's easy to say it doesn't. And no matter how you try saying it, they do, and they should, and they will. And that's the correct way. I have no problem with that. Crossing pavements, well, every junction, pretty much. For me, all this stemmed when, with the changes at the junction at Wannistow to Cinder Hill Street at Bridges Junction, when it went from a roundabout to a T-junction, the traffic jams that caused, the chaos that caused for those months, on top of the waterworks in Monmouth, all of that fell all in one hit. And I did advise at the time that that was likely to happen. But when that happened, everybody in the know took a shortcut down that Goldwire Lane. That's why it went bang. And I don't believe it's going bang now. And the evidence shows that it's not going bang now. So for me, I question whether that was right too. So from that, I'd now like to ask how we feel, and whether, Councillor New, would you like to repeat, and anybody else want to say, please? Yeah, I just said, has anybody got any comment? Anybody? No. Okay, Councillor New, would you like to propose whatever you said you wished to, please?
I'm not used to sitting at the front. Thank you for your comments, Chair. And like you said, there's sound discussion on both sides, and thanks for the opportunity to discussing it as well. It's been really, really good. I've just written down actually what we should say. It's only proper, in my view, that the committee takes fully on board the overwhelming wishes of the consultation, and our residents to make a clear recommendation to the Cabinet. It's my recommendation to the Cabinet member that we do the same. We have a duty to represent our residents and their views. By ignoring them, this clear result of this consultation will question our integrity and discourage people from participation in future consultations. It's my view that there's so much more work to be done on this project. We're nowhere near there. And as Councillor Easton said, why is there so many local residents opposed to this? So it's in my view, and in the spirit of, again, of wanting to work with you, that we do not recommend this report and move forward with the closure of Goldwine Lane. And you guide me on what the options are, but it's my recommendation that we don't go ahead with this.
Okay, so from that, I would take that I would like a vote as to how we feel about this, and who would like to recommend it to go as is, and who would like to recommend that it goes to Cabinet with the recommendation not to proceed and to perhaps review it again. Is that correct? Rob, would you like to go with that?
Yeah, so just for the sake of clarity for anyone watching, scrutiny committees don't have any power to make decisions, but they can put recommendations to the Cabinet, and thus any voting in this instance would be on a specific recommendation, i.e. what the chair just said. So something along the lines of, if we wanted to get the wording exactly right, that the committee does or doesn't endorse the proposal, and does or doesn't recommend that the closure goes ahead. So if we're happy with, if you want to just summarise one more time what the position would be, that would be the recommendation, and then we would present that as a committee, depending on whether there is agreement, and agreement would require a vote, but only on that and not on anything else, just for clarity for the public.
Okay, so I put forward that we recommend to the Cabinet that we revisit this and reinvestigate and to understand further options, with the purpose of holding fire on this single Cabinet member decision on proposing closure, permanent closure. Is that accurate enough?
That's fine, yeah.
Is it okay? Because we've had an awful lot of consultation and an awful lot of opposals. Yeah.
The concern I got, Chair, is that we can't just ignore the end of the experimental TRO.
Could we extend that? Well, that would be in the... Well...
It's not in our gift to do that, but...
Well, I don't know the way around that one, but there must be a way.
This is up to the experts.
Yeah,
can't extend their experimental traffic order. Our only option is to make it permanent or revoke it. There's two options.
Pardon me for being devil's advocate, but it was only supposed to be for 6 months and it's done 18, so...
No. Experimental traffic order can remain in place for up to 18 months. At the end of that 18 months, we make a decision then whether to make that order permanent or we revoke it. Well, we don't revoke it. It ultimately sort of ceases to exist because it passes the 18-month time frame.
So is there right of appeal to Welsh Government for people?
Not on an experimental, I believe.
Can we not open another experimental? Shall we just restart it again?
There's a potential for doing that, but there'd need to be a period where it wasn't in place.
Are we able to get a yes or a no?
It strikes me that we can restart the experiment we were reviewing. That would make sense to me if that was the case. That would keep everybody happy and allow us to investigate further and make sure we have absolutely clarified everything. And if we were allowed to include the ward members better, that might be even more helpful. Graham, did you have anything, or Carl?
we'd need to check how that would work. At the moment, it doesn't feel like we could move from the experimental traffic order without ceasing it. So you'd have to move back to the normal road traffic, and then whatever that period of time is, and we haven't done this, so it's not a comfortable place to be, but you'd have a time where it would return to normal trafficking conditions, which isn't
for a day.
We'd need to check whether in most things in traffic is around the 12-week period to give you that grace period. So it would be we'd have to check what that period is, but it's not advisable from an officer perspective to take that
It's
approach.
a shame it's taken so long to come to us if that's the case, because clearly this is disappointing, and that's the case. The consultation's been finished for a long time, and we haven't had those results. So to get to here now to hear that's slightly concerning. So is there no way at all of finding a way through this problem, please?
I think the point, I'm going to take you back to the purpose of this report. So Scrutiny are here today to scrutinise the recommendation, which is...
But I'm trying to put forward a recommendation that will cover all bases. That's what I'm trying to achieve.
I understand that at the moment, but we don't have that
answer
available to you.
Well, in that case, we carry on with our recommendation and leave you to worry about it externally. Is that okay? Yeah. Because we don't have to say anyway at the end. Right, okay. So I go back to, I'd like to propose, or Council New would like to propose, that we recommend to Cabinet that we go to further consultation and to further investigate options and to ensure that the consultation results and make sure everybody has been heard effectively and have a revisit. Is that fair and acceptable?
Sure. Surely we have to. Surely we have to basically decide whether we should revoke. We should make a recommendation for the experimental order to be revoked.
We're being pushed down that line, but I was hoping that perhaps we could re-investigate. But I'm happy to go either way.
I would assume that's what we have to do, isn't it? Because if we're coming to the end of the period, I think the point that you made is that it should have come to scrutiny before, so that of an 18-month experimental order, we'd still got 6 months left or something. Is the point I think you're making? But surely if we have to revoke it, I don't know what the time period is between that and you having to reinstate it if you need to, you see. So that's the question of looking at what the regulations say, and I'm not quite sure what they do say. I do know that during the experimental period, there is an allowance to have objections and to formalise those objections, but I'm not sure what the stage after that is. So, that's my concern. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got any opinions?
Yeah, I can't support revoking the order. Full stop. I believe that we've got to satisfy these residents. I don't believe we should revoke the order. There's a lot of work that's gone into it, and it makes a lot of sense. But we've got to sell this to the residents. So I feel that there's something we need to do to satisfy the residents. That's my concern. 227. They didn't object for nothing. That's my concern.
So you'd like to step back a moment and have another look at it?
I would like to step back a bit. If we revoke this, we're causing problems for ourselves.
Exactly. Okay. I get what you're saying. Okay.
Chair, I've had my hand up for a while.
Councillor Strong, sorry.
Yeah. I just think on your wording of Councillor Newell's proposal, you did that in as moderate a way as you could to encourage support for it. But it does need to be made absolutely clear that if we go with that proposal, we're going against what the officers were advising. They were not comfortable to advise. Well, it wasn't technically revoking; it was allowing the lapsing of the order. and then putting it back on. As long as people are aware that that's the case, then we can vote in a more informed way. And I'd be inclined to agree that letting it lapse and then putting it back on is not a good way to act.
Okay. All right. Anybody else got any views on this? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I presume that if you confirm an order, then basically there's no reason why you can't have another order to change it, isn't there?
Absolutely. If this order becomes permanent after 18 months, which is what the Cabinet report is intended to do, if for some reason further down the line we need to revisit it, we can revoke it at that time if there's a sort of requirement to do so. We can amend it further down the line, but ultimately this Cabinet report was produced at the end of the sort of 18-month period in order to make it a permanent order to move forward, and that's what the intention behind it is.
So are you saying that sort of like if you have a period of further negotiation and looking at the other options, that maybe 6 months down the line you could do another order instead and take that away so that there is access and so forth?
That's within the realms of possibility, yes.
Can I ask, so the consultation was done. We've been asking, I know the residents have been asking for the results and for them to be publicised, and yet we didn't come forward with those. Because if we had, we would have had this conversation a lot sooner, and we'd have been able to get to this point a lot sooner to have the discussion about where we go with it if we want to try and go back and find another way forward. And yet now we're in a stalemate, it would feel, and that doesn't feel comfortable. Is there, there must be a way around that. I just think there must be. Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with your comments that this questions has to be asked about this whole process, about how we've come here so late on such a big decision that's been going on for at least 18 months. My idea of these experiments is to provide evidence as to why something should happen. Now, in my view, and it is my view, and it's the view of the residents that Councillor Eason makes, that hasn't been proved. It hasn't. There's no real case that your trial has to result in Goldwine Lane being closed. That case has not been made. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such disagreement in this chamber today. I'm appalled that. I agree with Councillor Lucas. As a councillor, I'm elected to represent my residents' views. We're not being provided with information that I can go back to my residents, as Councillor Easton says, to discuss them and try and convince them. We've run out of, excuse my French, we've run out of time. Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? The serious questions need to be asked, please, Chair, as to the whole process of this consultation, why we're being ignored, why the residents are being ignored, and make sure this doesn't happen again. Please.
Okay, well, we're going round in circles somewhat, so we need to draw to a close. Councillor Deb, would you like to have a word, please?
Yes, I would. The reason why we are here today is that we have been asked to prepare a report for a Cabinet member decision regarding the outcome of the consultation on the experimental TRO. The purpose of today is for you to debate the recommendation that has been put forward to Cabinet, or the Cabinet member decision, that we are recommending that TRO becomes a permanent traffic order. We have undertaken the consultation. We have actually shared that consultation. I beg to differ with you in terms of the fact that the consultation was done incorrectly or that we have ignored it. If you actually go through the report, we have clearly outlined our views in terms of those responses. And the responses are largely, we want to use the lane in the event of a flood. We are clear that they can continue to use the lane in the event of a flood or any other emergency which prohibits them from using the other access. The other point they've raised is around the inconvenience and the additional congestion. The traffic counts and the data that we have does not support that. That is objective evidence.
You could say, why haven't we done that again more recently? That would be, an argument we could look at. But certainly the information that we have to date is objective evidence that is not the case. And we do not consider that 0.3 miles is too great a burden for a car user to travel down to be able to access the main road that they were going to access anyway. The third theme that has emerged strongly is that we think there should be a shared use rather than prohibit vehicles, share it. We've heard lots of discussions around that today, but the primary reason why that doesn't seem to work is because we cannot extend the footpath. And then you still create the conflict with vulnerable users because we are still asking them to dodge cars or to have cars in front of them or behind them. And if you've got a hearing impairment or you've got any other sensory impairment, what we're actually saying is that car takes priority over those individuals at that moment in time. I think one of the members of this committee actually stated around our requirements to promote active travel. Again, this, if it goes ahead, would actually support our objectives and the Welsh Government requirement for us to do that. I understand why people may not want this to happen because it is a change and there is actually now funneling all the traffic down one exit rather than two. But I do take exception to the fact that we haven't undertaken the process correctly and that we haven't listened to the consultation, because I think we have tried to do that as fairly as we could through it. What we can't do is agree with everyone. We have technical viewpoints and we have answered it based from an officer technical view. The view of this committee, the role of this committee is to agree or disagree with that. But from an officer perspective, we have undertaken, in my view, that process fairly and objectively.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Deb. That helped. Right, so we go back to the original problem. Do we recommend to the Cabinet refusal or to take it forward? That's a simple question, isn't it? Is that fair?
No, not simple. Refusal of what? Taking what forward? I'm surely as
Councillor Strong
said. Surely as what Deborah said is we are voting for the making of the order permanent, or not for it to be permanent. So it's yes if you're in favour of keeping the lane closed to access. So close to passage.
Okay, I'll repeat to you now. We're recommending. We can only recommend. We can do nothing else. It's not in our power or our gift. All right. Okay. So the recommendation is we're for making the road permanent as is. All right. So the permanent, making the temporary order permanent, or against going back. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Councillor Brown, before we vote, you have something?
Oops. I think, again, should actually add with a recommendation to review all the options.
That sounds fair to me. Okay. Right. So are we all clear on that? Yeah? That sounds okay?
Yeah.
All right.
So basically before the report, or we object to the report, is that?
With the review of going to look into more options. Okay. So are we... Yes, please, if you would.
Okay, yes. So for a vote purely to make the permanent closure, to make the closure permanent or not, and with the recommendation to review options, if I go around the room, I'll start in the chamber and then go online. So, Councillor Newell?
I'm against.
Against, yeah. Councillor Brown?
I'm against with reviewing the options, please.
With that caveat. Brilliant.
I was against as well. My microphone wasn't on.
Yes, I did. Sorry, I was. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
With the review.
Thank you. Councillor Bryn?
I support the officer recommendation.
Okay. Councillor McConnell?
Yes, for the recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Crook?
For the recommendation.
Okay. And Councillor Eason?
I'm abstaining on this one. I'm not happy.
Okay. Let me just write this down. Yep. Okay. And so Councillor Strong?
For.
Okay. And Councillor Dimmock?
Against.
And then the Chair?
Against, with recommendations to review, please.
Okay, so that is a tie of 4-4, which means the Chair has the casting vote. So that carries that as a recommendation, and purely as a recommendation, nothing binding, that the closure is made permanent with the recommendation to review options. And I believe if you're happy, Chair, that brings this item to a close.
Wonderful. And I think we should have a break now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
5 minutes, everybody.
What was the final count?
The final count was 4-4 with the chair having a casting vote. So to recommend that the closure not be made permanent with the further recommendation in that to review options.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask, how long is our break?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Sounds like
that's
a
fine.
plan.
We'll grab a cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, afternoon, everybody. Right, thank you for coming back after the break. A little comfort stop. Item 5 is animal welfare, to understand the roles and responsibilities of the Council's animal welfare team in relationship with RSPCA. And I'm going to add other bodies because I think that should be, that's yes. Okay, right. And in front of us we have Gareth and, sorry, I missed Zoe. Gareth and Zoe. So before we go too far on anything else, Gareth and Zoe, over to you.
Chair, can I just when officers are speaking, their cameras are on, because during the last discussion, that no cameras were on officers, so that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I meant to say that. Sorry, it's because the main camera in the chamber isn't working, guys. So we've got everyone who's on Teams, so that everybody's visible. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, right. Are we all happy? All right. So, yeah. It's like Laura Nardi in here today, I tell you. All right, after you go.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chair. Just quickly introduce myself. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Gareth Walters. I'm Head of Training Standards and Animal Health here. I've also got a strategic lead role for Training Standards Wales for Animal Health and Feed, and I chair the Welsh Animal Health Panel, as well as representing the WLGA. And I'll hand over to Zoe to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, my name is Zoe Phillips. I'm the Regional Coordinator and Project Manager for Animal Licensing Wales. I've also got a National and Lead Officer role as well. So I'm currently Chair of the National Animal Health and Welfare Panel, and I'm also Vice Chair of the National Companion and Exotic Animal Welfare Group as well. Lions and tigers and bears.
Right, so I am conscious of the time. I can't commit to a certain time frame. I was looking at 20 minutes, but when we put this together, I just realised, how much it is to try and get across and to understand. And one of my suggestions is maybe we think about a member seminar or another event or something where we can involve those wider organisations that have been mentioned, and we'll come on to talk about some of them. But I think, again, looking at some of the issues that they are, and some of the work that Zoe and myself are involved in, I think it would be good if we could lead on that from an All Wales perspective. But again, I won't preempt anything. So, quick introduction before I hand over to Zoe. Looking to cover a little bit on the service structure, just to give you a bit of information, not too much detail, statutory remit and legislative duties, non-statutory work involved around welfare, the rising pressures and welfare complaint trends, NGOs, non-government organisations which cover the third sector, including the role of the RSPCA, and others, animal licensing in Wales and the national model that was in the current programme for government, and hopefully will form part of the new government once it's formed in the Senate. Future priorities for animal health and welfare, and what yourselves as members probably need to know, and the support that we require. Just a quick introduction. So the Monmouthshire County Council Animal Health and Welfare Service, like other local authorities, it provides a critical role in safeguarding both public and animal welfare and well-being throughout the county. The remit spans statutory and discretionary responsibilities. Arguably, some of the non-statutory could be classed as statutory, but probably not a discussion for today. It's really a multifaceted service, central to economic, agricultural, commercial and community environments. The statutory service enforces a wide range of legislation, which Zoe was going to touch on shortly. So rather than go into detail, I'll leave her to cover that shortly. It's a little bit about the service then. So the structure of the MCC Animal Health Welfare Service is designed to support both operational delivery and strategic compliance across the county. So with myself as team manager for trading standards and animal health, the overall responsibility lies with myself for that oversight, the strategic planning, ensuring that the service is compliant with legislative requirements, local priorities and national frameworks. Reporting into this role, we have on the animal health side of the trading standards team currently 3.8 fair trading / animal health officers. One of those officers is actually long-term temporary funded with money that we bring in through the feed delivery programme. We also lead on that for Gwent, which is a regional model across Wales. Another of those officers leads on feed and is undertaking the wider trading standards qualification. So again, that has an impact on a relatively small team. We carry out a range of inspections, investigations and enforcement under a broad amount of legislation. Again, Zoe will come and touch on some of that. And I think the licensing element of the service is currently undertaken by Animal Licensing Wales, which again I've referenced in previous meetings, but happy to touch on it again later. But that really allows MCC to benefit from a shared national expertise involved in coordinating training, standardising licensing processes, and this interconnected structure really supports the service resilience, because we'd really struggle. At one point we were down to 1.5 officers, and that was an interesting time, shall we say. And I think the team now can respond to the sort of the rise in demand, the complex investigations that we get involved in, and multi-agency operations. Key things that we consider in is the officer development, succession planning, and maintaining those core competencies, which obviously is essential due to the specialist nature of the work, and stay current with, I say, evolving legislation. At the moment, it just seems to be new legislation after new legislation. But at the same time, we're dealing with very old legislation, which often doesn't sort of help us when trying to deliver the service. Okay, that's enough for me. I'll pass on to the expert.
Can I pinch you so I can see it on the screen? Thank you very much. So I'm going to look at the roles and responsibilities, and I'm going to show you how it fits into the wider function, effectively. So we have statutory and non-statutory agencies involved in animal health and welfare. Statutory are those who have to be there. We've got DEFRA in England, we've got Welsh Government in Wales, but we've got Animal and Plant Health Agency, Food Standards Agency, we've got HMRC, Police, Association of Chief Trade and Standards Officers, for example. But we've got other agencies such as your Rural Inspectorate Wales, your British Cattle Movement Service. There are others who are considered to be statutory agencies. And then we've got non-statutory agencies. So the RSPCA are such non-statutory, the World Horse Welfare, National Farmers Union. We've got Animal Welfare Committee. Animal Welfare Committee are those that write codes of practice in relation to how to care for animals. And we've got Compassion in World Farming. We can go on. There's an awful lot of non-government organisations that are non-statutory. So I'm going to get a little bit technical, and I do apologise. So the UK legislation, the majority of our animal health and welfare legislation derives from European law. So a lot of that then, European law, is enabled into legislation for us through the Animal Health Act 1981. The Animal Health Act says, under Section 50, that a local authority shall execute and enforce this act. So there's a shall. There's not an option. We have to enforce that legislation. And it says, under Section 52, every local authority shall appoint as many officers as they think necessary to enforce the act. So there's no choice there. It's shall. We have to, and we have to fund it. So how do we do that? So we look at proactive enforcement. So we would do feed inspections that would be planned because we get funding from Food Standards Agency. We look at reactive enforcement, so we would respond to any complaints. We focus on intelligence, so we work a lot around information that we receive from the general public. That information is recorded on our intelligence database, and then we look at what the priorities are and where we need to target our resources as well. And then we also focus on risk-based intervention, so where the risk is high for where we are, our work is needed. So there's 4 different areas of how we work. It's not just a case of working to a programmed inspection. So the objectives are, the overall objective is to prevent the spread of animal diseases. In Monmouthshire, you're obviously aware of where we are with that. We need to protect the welfare of animals, that's on farm, at animal gatherings, such as the market or any other places of sale, abattoirs, that sort of thing, and also in transit, when they're travelling there. We're also there to protect the public. We're there to provide advice and education as well, and also to promote growth and business support. So we're there for consumer protection, consumer confidence, and also for business protection as well. So that's where animal health overlaps with trading standards and fair trading. So the Animal Health Act, as I said, local authorities must enforce, and then the Animal Welfare Act 2006 is the more recent piece of legislation, and that says that the local authorities may enforce. So we don't have to. However, I can go on and give you a bigger as to why we should, because European legislation 2017-625, I did tell you, I did warn you I'd become really anal and get into the detail, but 2017-625 does say that we do need to enforce welfare legislation as well. So although the wording of the Act states may, I would always argue that it is a must as well. So if we consider our Animal Health Act and our Animal Welfare Act, our umbrella pieces of legislation, under those 2 pieces of legislation are where we find our other orders and regulations. And so there will be an awful lot of legislation falling under those 2 main pieces, and there'll be over 200 pieces of legislation that will fall under there. So our powers in relation to the Animal Health Act are quite extensive, especially for purposes of disease. So an officer has to be appointed by the local authority for the purpose of the Act, and we've got quite extensive powers of entry, especially in relation to disease. So we can go into any premise where we consider things are not being complied with. Animal Welfare Act, we've got powers under the Animal Welfare Act to serve a notice, what we would call an improvement notice, a Section 10 improvement notice. So if somebody is not complying with their duty of care under Section 9 of the Act, then we can serve a notice on them telling them that they must comply. And then, although, yeah, I won't go into that. I won't go into the notice part. And then also, we've got powers under Section 18, and if an inspector or a constable believes that a protected animal is suffering or is likely to suffer, then we can take steps for that animal to alleviate the suffering. Now, those steps could be taking the animal into possession, it could be taking it for veterinary treatment, there's a number of options available to us, and it does include destruction as well. Our Section 19 are our powers of entry for Section 18 purposes. So if we believe that an animal is suffering, we have a power of entry that we can execute under Section 19. So an inspector or a constable may enter the premises for the purposes of searching for that protected animal, and then we can take whatever action we deem necessary. Now, it does not allow us to go into any part of a dwelling, a domestic dwelling that's used as a private dwelling. So we can go into the farm building, but we wouldn't be able to go into the farmhouse, for example. And an inspector or a constable may, if necessary, use reasonable force for entry, but only if it appears to him that entry is required before a warrant can be obtained and executed. Perfect example of that would be a dog in a hot car. We wouldn't have to wait to go and get a warrant from the court to smash the window of the car. We could just smash the window of the car. So, Animal Welfare Act 2006, it says an inspector may carry out an inspection in order to check compliance with regulations. So this is our power of entry in relation to farm premises. So the Welfare Farmed Animal Regs, if we want to go in there to check compliance with the Welfare Farmed Animal Regs, we would use our powers under Section 28 of the Animal Welfare Act. An inspector may enter premises which he reasonably believes to be premises on which animals are being bred or kept for farming purposes. May apply for a warrant if required. So if we believe that entry is not going to be granted, then under Section 23, we can apply to the courts for a warrant. So the Act further determines then what an inspector is. An inspector is a person that is appointed by the local authority or by APHA, the Animal and Plant Health Agency. So if you're an authorised officer under the Animal Welfare Act, then you have that power, those powers available that I've just discussed with you. Charity officers, such as the RSPCA, are not authorised under the Act. They do not have the powers available to them that we have available to us. And that's any other non-government organisation as well. So, inspector, for the purposes of the Act, is an inspector authorised under the Act. So that could be APHA, the Animal and Plant Health Agency, or a local authority inspector. The Act also refers to constables, so that would also be police officers. Now, our powers are extensive for animal health and welfare, and they do allow us with the capability to enforce the law that is there. But obviously, the resources capability is the resource capacity, will vary from local authority to local authority as to how they wish to use their powers. And I think because of the wording of the Act, that's why sometimes it blurs whether, because local authorities will say the Animal Welfare Act is a may, not a must, and therefore they may not decide to use their powers. But who can prosecute under the Animal Health Act 1981 and the Animal Welfare Act 2006? There is case law, which is RSPCA versus Woodhouse, that says that it doesn't have to be a government organisation that can take a prosecution. It can be common enforcers as well. So other agencies can take prosecutions, and that's where the RSPCA or other agencies will sometimes take prosecutions under the legislation. It doesn't mean that they've got powers, it just means that they can take a prosecution. So why we can't share information with non-government organisations? We've got strict legal restrictions on data sharing under GDPR and Data Protection Act, as you're all aware. Non-government organisations are not public authorities and they do not have a statutory enforcement power. So that means there's no inherent legal gateway that permits us to pass them personal data. Now, they are refusing to pass data back to us as well, which is something that we are dealing with on a national basis. But they are saying as a business, they don't have to share the information with us. So that is one of the challenges that we are facing. But as a government department, we are not allowed to share information with them, with any non-government organisation. So, as I said to you, these are just put some nice pictures in and some not nice pictures, I'm not going to lie, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we deal with. So, farm inspections, this is some of the routine work that we would undertake. Markets, we regularly attend markets, do inspections at markets and look at the animals that are coming in, checking that they're fit for transport, checking that they are identified correctly. In transport, we will do checks both in as I said, the market, we will do transport checks, but we also do port operations. So we check the animals that are coming into the port to see if they are coming in legally or if they are being brought in with or without the correct paperwork. Dog breeding establishments. So we do inspections at dog breeding establishments to check if they comply with the conditions and the legislation. Abattoirs. Sorry for the offensive picture there. This is a picture of a typical an animal that has gone into a local abattoir, and then we've had a complaint about the fitness of that animal to be transported. This is another arm of investigation. And then this is a case where we went into somebody's domestic dwelling where we had to get a warrant because we were going into a domestic dwelling. So just wanted to give you an idea. I thought we'd finish and put some pictures of nice puppies because everybody loves a picture of a nice puppy. I'll pass back over to the boss.
Thank you. Great. So I'll skip through some of these slides because Zoe will have covered the finer detail around the powers that we cover and the various bits of work. So the Animal Health Welfare Act obviously establishes the offences, cruelty and a duty of care. And I think that's the difficulty sometimes that we face is, like Zoe said, is not having, maybe historically there was always a line that while we would deal with farm animals, as soon as it got to companion animals, our only involvement historically would have been companion animals with regards to licensing. But that's changed. A lot of the issues we're dealing with now around responsible dog ownership, XL bullies, we've all heard about it. It all stems from responsible dog breeding in the first place, and that legislation being properly enforced. So it's not a quick solution. It's not a quick win. Yes, you can bring bans in for some things, but there's other problems brewing if you're not dealing with the problem at source. And obviously failure to fill statutory duties can place the authority at legal and reputational risk, emphasising the importance of robust systems, sufficient staffing and ongoing training. These duties are the backbone of MCC's legal responsibility to protect animal health, welfare and public safety. Again, that's touching on the non-statutory element, which Zoe's covered, so I'll quickly skip through that. It wasn't anything particular. I think the point I wanted to raise here was, although non-statutory in nature, and again arguable, this work is highly valued by communities and contributes significantly to improved welfare outcomes, and not just from the animals' perspective, but the owners as well. So supporting early intervention, raising awareness, and reducing the burden on statutory enforcement as a result is obviously quite important. As welfare concerns become more complex and public expectations increase, non-statutory functions play an increasingly effective role in shaping the whole animal welfare governance. And as I mentioned, a key bit of work at the moment is that responsible dog ownership work that's been done, nationally, and it'll be good to see some of the work that's coming out of that. I mentioned the rising pressures and welfare complaint trends. I haven't drilled down or brought all the stats along, but it's quite clear now that, especially where colleagues in the police are struggling, like local authorities, from a resource perspective, whilst they have the powers, they don't have the knowledge or the expertise, and often they turn to us. Similarly, even our colleagues in the NGOs and the third sector, they are pulling back from things. They'll be there to support you, they'll help you, but there's less and less spaces, kennelling spaces or other facilities. Similarly, the RSPCA themselves stepped back from farm animal welfare a while back, but even now, they don't take on all animal welfare calls that come in about companion animals. So again, it is a concern. recent years, the complaint volumes have risen significantly, particularly in relation to companion animals and licensed breeding, hence the reason Animal Licensing Wales project got off the ground. Abandonment, stray dogs, backyard farming, general welfare that's linked back to economic hardship with the cost of living crisis, directly influenced, the fallout from COVID and everybody turning to sort of having puppies and the costs that escalated and organised crime got involved. It really has had a significant impact now on the welfare going forward. Skip over the role at NGOs because Zoe's already touched on that. But again, I think the one key bit about this is in Wales, we have got a good working relationship with Welsh Government, very, very strong. They've also in turn got good links with Animal Welfare Network Wales. So they represent a lot of the smaller local charities and sanctuaries. But also you've got the Companion Animal Welfare Group, which have the larger charities. So it's a combination between the two that then sort of form a good sounding base for a lot of the work that Wales is leading on and taking forward. And obviously, we are very, very reliant on third sector charities for helping us when we do have to, unfortunately, seize animals. The animal licensing in Wales, the national model referenced is what was put into the programme for government at the last end of following the last end of the election. It did come as a bit of a surprise to a lot of the officials, and it didn't come with sort of any definition of what was intended. So it's almost a bit of a blank canvas. And animal licensing in Wales came about as a result of that, because the chief veterinary officer at the time sort of approached myself and Zoe to say, well, what can we do? What difference can we make? What support can be given to local authorities? Obviously, the first choice would have been for all local authorities to get extra resources and extra staff. But the reality would have been, the cost of that would have been significant just to put one officer in each authority. You're talking the best part of £1 million. So, by doing this on a national basis and pulling a model together which ensures consistency, raises quality and sustainability in animal-related licences. It provides expertise available to local authorities. If they need to pick up the phone, they can. If they're struggling because they've only got one member of staff that knows anything and they're off sick, then we can step in, we can help them. And really it's there to support local authorities through Trading Standards Wales and Monmouthshire, as that's where we're based, and build on that strong relationship. One of the central benefits of ALW, Animal Licensing Wales, is the shift towards a unified inspection and licensing framework. Because up until now, one of the problems we had with dog breeding was the fact that whilst the legislation was reviewed and brought in 2014, so relatively new compared to the other animal establishment legislation, it didn't go far enough. It didn't take that extra step they needed. And instead of increasing the number of licenses of licensed breeders, actually it just changed the dynamics. A few dropped out of the market, but it didn't prevent organised criminality getting involved, like I mentioned during the COVID era. So we've put it to Welsh Government, and hopefully there'll be another review coming out shortly, consultation on new regulations, where we will ensure that there isn't that loophole, there isn't that opportunity because of the current definition to allow breeders to go under the radar, or to be able, in reality, the only way you could stop it is making sure anybody that sells or breeds a dog, a cat, has to have some form of license or registration through the local authority. And hopefully that then will help eliminate local variation, support legitimate businesses, and just improve things generally for animal welfare going forward. Okay, just coming to the last two. So future priorities. Looking at the service, we've got to balance our statutory obligations with the rising pressures and that we've referenced, with the increasing welfare concerns. Key priorities strengthening statutory delivery through improved workforce resilience. And again, it's not just animal health. This is right across public protection and many other services, as you'll know, in local authorities. But it's just the same here. You know, we've got an apprenticeship in place now for regulatory compliance officers, but again, it's quite resource intensive once you've got somebody there for existing officers to sort of work with those apprenticeships. So it's something that we're working to improve as we go along. Embedding the animal licensing Wales model locally is another significant priority, because that's enabled us to benefit from that wider toolkit, intelligence resources, expert networks, improve service quality. And I think I was going to mention, I just can't see it, just the fact that the priority has already been mentioned by Welsh Government, that animal welfare establishments and sanctuaries currently aren't regulated in any shape or form. And a lot of the issues that we find aren't necessarily people, because in that world, they're not there to make money. Although, again, we've got situations where there are people doing it deliberately, exploiting animals to make money. But we've got other scenarios where people are genuinely trying to help people, and they can't say no, and they've taken an animal, and all of a sudden it becomes a much bigger issue because they can't say no, and all of a sudden they haven't got the facilities to care for the numbers that they've got. So again, I think that's the reason this priority has been put in place by Welsh Government to be looked at next. And finally, just a quick bit on elected members effectively, and I really feel that you all should play a key role in supporting strategic direction. I know you've all got multiple competing priorities like everything else, but we probably haven't made enough maybe of yourselves to for you to understand. I've got examples recently that have suddenly come out where Councillor Garrett said a particular issue in his area, which we're hoping to work with, but it's at domestic premises. There's other complaints, there's other issues, and what we find with animal welfare is if the key issue or problem at hand can't be dealt with, but there's an animal around, then all of a sudden there'll be an animal welfare issue that will come along. And we get dragged into something now which maybe not necessarily something we should deal with. Similarly, at the moment down in Mega, Councillor Francis Taylor and Councillor Lisa Dimmock have had significant issues with horses, with our friends in the Romany traveller communities, and again fly grazing. We've got powers, but those powers, if we use them, either require us to take them into possession if they're not complied with, which then is a burden, is a cost to ourselves, or ultimately, as Zoe said, we have got the power of destruction, but nobody really wants to see a healthy animal put to sleep unnecessarily. So I think it would be good, I think, if we could work with yourselves to grow your knowledge a bit on the back of today, look at the larger bit of work that we do in Wales to say, well, how can we put something together which isn't going to be resource intensive or need extra resources for the local authority perspective, but can benefit from the wider partnership model with third sector. But ultimately, if we can't, then the mismatch is going to create reputational challenges. Residents often assume that the councils hold greater powers. We have got powers, but we don't legally possess all the powers we would like necessarily to deal with some of these issues, and often they only come about because something else happens. And if we were aware at an earlier stage, then we could intervene, possibly give some advice and help those people before it gets to that situation. And that's just a bit on statutory duties. Yeah, and I think, and that was probably my only point back to yourselves, really, to think about, maybe not necessarily for today, but what is the expectation on the Animal Health and Welfare Service from the perspective of that arguably non-statutory element with welfare, because we know the impact on residents and the wider issues. It's quite important, and it does impact, and whilst we can help and advise, sometimes we just feel actually people are in a difficult position, they do need our support, but without the resource, other things fall off, don't they? Otherwise
Okay.
I'll start going off. And,
Yeah, I think it's time. Right, okay. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to know anybody who would like to ask some questions. Anybody got their hands up? I know Lisa is very keen. Oh, who had their hand? Yes, Councillor Crook. I always say it.
Mike.
I'm sorry. I do apologise.
Peter.
After you.
Peter.
Yes,
may I
you're
ask,
right. I was slow then. I missed that joke too. Sorry.
Can you confirm how many inspectors you have to cover the whole of Monmouthshire?
So we currently got 3.8 officers, but one of them is temporary funded, and another one does have a wider role with regards to training standards.
So how are you coping to cover Monmouthshire?
It's very, very reactive. The animal licence in Wales team, we've currently got 10 animal licence officers plus support staff. But again, they've got a Wales-wide remit, so it's helpful that we're able to use them to deal with the licensing side of issues, and extra support if we need it for other things. But in reality, if that funding stopped, we'd be left with...
And the other question I have is, obviously there was a large influx of dogs mainly on COVID situation. Are you finding that there's obviously an increase in people neglecting those animals or getting rid of them, or because it's now about 3 or 4 years into that situation? I've forgotten the increase. It was quite a percentage increase of dog population while COVID came about.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's no data out there per se. I think we find in there are scenarios, but even with the stray dog side of things, it's very difficult because we know veterinary practices will deal with a lot of issues, so we don't know the full picture of that. But I suspect that there are probably problems still building as opposed to showing themselves at the moment.
And the last question, really, as a ward member, I've had several residents ask me how I can sort of help with veterinary bills. Do you have any input into the veterinary business? Because some of the bills that I've been shown are astronomical. So how on earth can we expect the normal resident to pay these bills especially for dogs? It was £180 for one consultation I saw, and £67 for some almost aspirins. Have you got an input into the veterinary business?
We haven't got an input into the veterinary businesses as such. With my training standards hat on, it has been picked up very widely, but the complaints and the Competition and Markets Authority is actively looking into it. So they've already produced an interim report where they've identified practices that aren't effectively legal and should be being looked at. They've looked at it, but part of it is that wider competition. A lot of the small veterinary practices have been bought up by bigger concerns. And then a lot of the vet, and Zoe can give more information on this, all of a sudden they've been given targets to hit, and because it's a commercial business, not what the veterinary practices were originally set up for. So,
yeah, I was going to say, CMA are currently looking at the pricing for the vets at the moment. There's a wider piece of work been going on, but I think it's been impacted significantly by the number of corporate organisations that have taken over your small independent veterinary practices. Also, the Veterinary Surgeons Act is currently being looked at the moment. It's out for consultation. So, I would encourage everybody to look at how they could feed into that as well, to see how that could be raised as part of that consultation. It's an opportunity, isn't it, to get something...
Okay, I believe it was Councillor Newell next.
Thank you, Chair. Zoe and Gareth, that was thanks for that report. Really enjoyed it. That's a subject sort of close to my heart now. I've my other half, Kirby. The first text I sent was, "You've got to watch this on YouTube." She wasn't interested in Gold White Lane, but she I've got to pay tribute to her and her friends before I ask my question. She rescues cows and sheep, or sheeps as I call them. We've got 2 rescue greyhounds at home. You've met them, Chair, haven't you? And she was part of the campaign to ban greyhound racing in Wales. So she was in floods of tears because her late greyhound Nala was the greyhound at the face of that campaign. And I see that Scotland followed suit yesterday in banning greyhound racing as well. So if I can just pay tribute to all those who campaigned for that ban. And she's trying to turn me into a farmer. Fascinating stuff. My question was just simply, there's laws we have to follow and certain cases we have to follow through. That's mandatory. I'm just interested in the cases that we may have to follow through. On what basis do we decide? Would it be cost? Is there a certain threshold criteria? Or maybe sometimes it's an area we don't want to go in, or lack of resources? I'm just interested in how would you come to a decision as to when you might interfere is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, when you might get involved and when you wouldn't. What would be the thing there? Thanks again. I really enjoyed that.
It's an interesting one because I think when you look at it from normal enforcement work, say in train standards, where you're not dealing with sentient beings, then it's not different in the sense of you take the same approach. You take every case on the facts, what evidence you've got, what the issues, situations are. But with animal welfare, it's increasingly difficult because of those costs. We try not to make decisions, let that influence the fact that, because ultimately, if an animal's suffering, we've got a duty, and we need to do something about it. Having said that, it's a situation we've got now at the moment with animal licence in Wales. We want to support local authorities. Ideally, we'd be there to undertake inspections so that they can look at these other issues. But we know, unfortunately, that local authorities aren't in a position to be able to do it, and others have already said no, we can't take it. The costs involved are too prohibitive. One of the issues we've had over the last few years is the knowledge of the court system being chock-a-block, again after COVID. And the difficulty is when we've got the power to seize animals, but if we can't get them before the magistrate promptly, or the defence spin a legal argument that all of a sudden you've got a trial to do it when actually the legislation makes it quite clear we've got the power, as long as the judge is satisfied that the owner of the animal has had the opportunity to be heard. If there's no mitigation, then they've got it. But again, it's an education thing. So I can't give you an exact. It is a case-by-case basis. I think the one thing Zoe and I are both the same as is cost won't ultimately be the deciding factor. If it needs to be done, it needs to be done. There was an operation last week, not in Monmouthshire, further afield. I can't go into details. It's an ongoing investigation. There's a little bit of publicity, but we had to go prepared on the basis that whatever we found there, we may have come away seizing hundreds of animals. And, that's difficult, but that was the situation. We work with partners, third sector organisations, to say, right, is there any way that we can put these animals? But, we haven't got quarantine facilities in Wales, let alone extra kennelling facilities. And again, it's all part of the ongoing discussions with the officials in Welsh Government. And to be fair to them, they are looking at ways they can help us. But it's difficult.
Sorry, can I also add to that though? If you recall, I said about how we work, but we look at priorities, we look at intelligence-led enforcement as well. So we would look at the number of complaints, the level of complaints that we get in relation to that area. We don't just go in and remove everything. That's not our first port of call. We try to work with businesses to bring them into compliance first, and where that's not working, and we can see that animals continue to suffer, we cannot facilitate the suffering of animals. It comes a point where we have to step in as well. So it's finding that balance. On a farm, it would be very different. So if we turned up with your rescue cows and your rescue sheep and you're not dealing with them, then, we can serve statutory notices and we go down that route as far as we can to try to bring you into compliance. And then it gets to the point where if that's not effective, then further action has to be considered.
And on that point, with the farm animal side, we've got an example where we did have to seize 128 cattle a couple of years back. Now, they had to go up country to get housed and looked after. It did take a few months for them to get in front of the court. But in that time, those animals had been brought into a better welfare state. They'd improved. We were actually able to sell those animals when they were handed over to us, so we could recoup that money. Yeah, and anything left would be handed back to the original owner. Companion animals, you don't really get our opportunity. And I think that's a difficult. No, thanks for that.
No, I was going to say perhaps it would help to give a context. Those 128 animals, when we took those into possession, they were worth £40,000 roughly. When we sold them, they doubled in price. So effectively, they covered the cost of caring for them, whereas we took 6 dogs and they could cost the same amount of money, but there's no value for them at the end. Effectively, they would have to be put to sleep because they considered to be suffering. So you can't look at it in a monetary way either, can you?
Thanks for you.
Councillor Lisa Dimmock.
Yeah, just on that, if I needed to, I'd sell my house for my dog. As you know, this thing I'm really passionate about, and I'll be honest, Gareth, I really don't feel that governments, local authorities are even scratching the surface of animal neglect. The RSPCA say they investigate animal abuse cases. As far as, and it's like, what do you class as abuse? Because for me, a dog not being in a warm home, sheltered, fed every day, walked, that's abuse in my eyes. But when I've tried to report cases, a dog is left outside, it has a bowl of water, there is no action to take. How are we in society finding that acceptable? And I take on board there are different types of ownership, because obviously if you own a farm, you've got especially thick coat collies, they don't want to be inside a warm house. But if you've got something like a boxer or a staffy, they are domesticated companions that should be in a house in my eyes. And it's how do we tackle that? And I know that you say about education, and we can do lots with young people and children who are in homes where maybe forms of animal abuse is ongoing, people hitting their animals. How do you educate an adult how to become a responsible owner? And I, as the party I'm part of, I believe in limited government, but even I am going down that route of thinking dog ownership and cat ownership, people should be licensed. What in the animal welfare team, what would be the perfect picture of improving animal health and welfare going forward is my first question. And I've got lots of questions to go through. I'm really sorry, obviously I asked for this to come to select committee because even I'm a bit thrown a step back with how much you have to take into consideration in your department. I am shocked. It's huge, and I'm just sat here now thinking, how on earth can we improve this for those that don't have a voice? Oh, and Maggie's just come upstairs and started licking my hand as I started speaking. Hello.
Should we fight over who's going first?
We're relieved to see Maggie as a dog, Lisa.
I read something earlier today, and they said I would let my dog represent me in court, and and it just I think it kind of shows where some people lay their priorities. my role, as we explained earlier, is also a national role. One of the key things for us is responsible dog ownership. We feed directly into DEFRA and the work that they've been doing. The majority of the time, it comes back to resources. I've just had a meeting with DEFRA now in relation to stray dogs, and they're discussing stray versus abandonment. Again, it comes back to local authority resources. When I put the legislation up there earlier, the Animal Health Act 1981, it says that local authorities must have sufficient staff to enforce their duties. Those duties have significantly changed since 1981. There's a number of pieces of legislation that have been implemented since then. The Animal Welfare Act came into effect in 2006. We've had it for 20 years. We are asking for a review of that through our professional organisation because we are saying it's not fit for purpose currently. We need more resourcing to be able to effectively deliver that as our functions under that. But you also heard me say about 2017-625. It's a European piece of legislation that kind of slipped in, and that clearly states there that we should have adequate resources to be able to fund this. And this is why I keep pushing that back to central government and to Welsh Government. And only this week have I mentioned that other tools that are available in England that we should have available to us. And I did say to Welsh Government, a really good politician would see this as a really good move, that if they did go down that route of fixed penalty notices, because if we were able to issue fixed penalty notices because people were failing in their duty of care under Section 9 of the Act, then that money comes back into the authority, and that would, not that I'm saying we would use it to income generate, however it would cover the costs of what we're incurring. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And we are, please be assured that we are knocking on doors whenever we possibly can. And, I am using every opportunity available to us. However, I do feel that there's key pieces of legislation that I've mentioned that says animal health and welfare, and it does include welfare, should be adequately resourced by the local authority.
And when it comes to sharing data with NGOs, and I appreciate GDPR, but when you're saying that you focus on intelligence, surely the two need to work in collaboration and be sharing that intelligence to tackle these issues.
Yes, ideally. However, that legislation prevents us from being able to share. What differentiates your larger NGOs, your Dogs Trust, your Battersea, your RSPCA, what differentiates them between any other rescue that's being set up down the street? There isn't. So currently that's why GDPR and DPA does protect us and prevent us from sharing that information.
Because obviously there's lots of dog rehoming charities, these charities that bring in dogs from Eastern Europe. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. So how do you differentiate the two? But obviously Dogs Trust, Battersea, RSPCA are trusted, long-standing charities that we all love and trust. That's why people plough millions into donations. Okay. And with regards to dog breeding establishments, can you just clarify, if you're a backstreet dog breeder, what legislation's in place to deter you from doing that? What is the actual law?
So there's two
at the moment.
There's currently two pieces of legislation that cover dog breeding. We've got the Dog Breeding Regs 2014. They are Wales-specific legislation. 3 or more breeding bitches, 3 or more litters a year, and you require a licence. We've also got a newer piece of legislation that I'm going to refer to as the layer regs, because if I'm honest, I can't remember the full title, and we always use them. They shortened for term. Licensing of animal involving animals. So the layer regs requires that anybody who's making more than £1,000 in profit and is advertising as a business and selling puppies, then they would also require a licence. And what we've been doing the last couple of months is we have been writing out to a lot of these people who are advertising, the single litter of puppies, £1,000 each, 7 to 10 in a litter. They're advertising on a pet selling website. We have just had opinion from a barrister that they are then should be considered as a commercial entity, and they require a license. So inadvertently, I think when the Welsh Government brought the legislation in, they have captured dog breeding effectively, and we are now starting to really push that out and try to bring everybody into a licensing regime.
Okay.
And if they don't come into the licensing regime, when we mention HMRC referral, it does kind of stop them in their tracks.
That's good to know. That's definitely good to know, and something maybe I'll remind people going forward. Not that I know any dog breeders. I don't think any dog breeders would want to be friends with me, because I am all for rehoming unwanted dogs. They are so loving, so rewarding and grateful. So yeah, although they do trash the house every now and again. But thank you both. I will be in touch. I don't want to hog it because I can see Louise wants to come in, but thank you ever so much.
Just wanted to pick up, Lisa, on your point about education and everything, because again, it's something ideally we'd like to do. A lot of our work now is preventative, is reactive. Sorry, it should be preventative, and it's the same right across trading standards. It's the same with scams, doorstep crime. Everything we used to try to do to prevent things now is ultimately waiting for something to happen before we do. And we just think, if we could get in at the education in the curriculum level, get that in there, and then the children are the ones who will go home and tell their parents. But ultimately, you want to get it to start that process.
I was reading I'm on a lot of Facebook pages, both ones that are selling dogs, and I always comment on there saying, please don't advertise on Facebook. You have no idea where this dog is going to end up. Please, if you need to rehome a dog, I completely understand that people's circumstances changing. Rehome through a reputable rehoming charity, but I appreciate they are bursting at the seams. But also just the stuff I see on social media about dog care and owning a dog, and I cringe, and I read stories, and it literally breaks my heart into 1,000 pieces, because you hear of the most horrific abuse cases, and that's both towards people and animals. But I read an article the other day where there was an abuse going on in the home, and it was the child that realized this isn't right and reported it, and it was that child who rang the police. And I really think we need to be getting a message and awareness into our schools, because if children see that unpleasant behavior and an animal being ill treated and understand how we should be looking after them, that message can go home. And children are so brave today, they will flag it, they will see it, and I really do think you're going to be getting a lot of reports coming through schools. I really do. So yeah, but I'm going to play this back, and I'm going to take on board everything you and Zoe have said, and I'm sure there's going to be motions coming left, right and centre from myself, because this is something I care greatly about, as does Martin as well, as I know.
Can I also add as well, though, that at the moment, Animal Licensing Wales is doing a significant amount of work on social media to try to promote responsible dog ownership, as well as the other areas that we cover. And we're also trying to build the website, the Animal Licensing Wales website, to be more of a portal for information. And we are hoping to further develop and deliver training modules through that, how to ensure you're meeting your duty of care, etc. Yeah. But it is a bigger program of work, longer term.
Okay. And I'm sorry for just focusing on dogs. I have limited understanding when it comes to livestock. I'm not a farmer, so I've just focused on what I know. So thank you.
Okay, Lisa, you done now? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Looking at the presentation, obviously you mentioned that you thought it was better in terms of having fixed penalties, in terms of animal welfare. Does that apply to the domestic situation as well as, obviously people who've got dog kennels and so forth? Or are you saying across the board on fixed penalties? But the other thing about your presentation that I noticed was that you say that you need a warrant for domestic premises. So how often and what sort of evidence do you need to gather in terms of getting a warrant, and how difficult is it? And is that an area of legislation that should change so it's not so difficult when an animal is being abused in a domestic premises to actually do something about it? Because there's obviously going to be a time lag between when you get some information and when you actually get a warrant. I think the other question I wanted to ask was about, what do you do about dangerous dogs that are, in a domestic premises who, for example, there's reports of them biting, just pedestrians walking along and so forth. I know there's Dangerous Dogs Act and the police can act, but how can you do any work in this area as well? Thank you.
I think dangerous dogs wise, yeah, straight away it's a referral to the police. We don't get involved in that. Obviously, in our environmental health team, our colleagues have got public space protection orders, so that's looking at some of that as well. But initially, it's a police referral if there's anything, whether it's what's the word I'm looking for? Designated dangerous dog, or whether it is just an accusation or somebody has been bitten. It's purely police. But the wider question then is partly where we're coming from. Historically, if it was purely domestic premises and there was no other intelligence or evidence to say there was other activities going on, that's something that we would normally pass. You'd say, well, give the RSPCA a call, and they would look into it. And I think that we're getting to the point now with the referrals and the information we're getting through that actually we probably need a clearer guide as to where that line should be. Some authorities will still take the stance, it's not statutory, we won't do it. But I think, like we're finding here, there's a lot of people out there who've got these concerns, like Lisa. And, really it'd be good to know what your expectations as members would be of the service.
Sorry, just carrying on from that, I don't understand. Does it mean that obviously the RSPCA does the investigation in relation to domestic premises, and then they provide the information for you for a warrant, or does the RSPCA itself apply for a warrant? How does this warrant situation happen? And have you applied for warrants yourself as a local authority? So I don't understand the interaction between the two. I appreciate that the RSPCA can investigate, but I don't know how. And obviously this data protection thing. Are they going to pass on relevant information? I sometimes think that data protection avoids common sense in terms of sharing information and what the priority is in terms of protecting the animal from abuse.
Yeah, it is a little bit political with a small p. Because the RSPCA have been pushing for powers, and because they as Zoe showed. But I think the difficulty is that, like ourselves, you'll get different officers who will respond to things differently, and similarly with the RSPCA, we've had history. What the RSPCA haven't got powers, but they'll turn up in a uniform, and a lot of people then will say, "Oh," like an inspector. They say, "Oh, you must have it," when they haven't. Now they're there, obviously for the right reasons, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. So if they've got a bigger investigation, then they either come to the local authority or to the police to support them to get that warrant.
So basically, although they can do a private prosecution, they can't actually apply for a warrant.
No,
and
they can't.
Just wondered how many warrants the local authority here had actually applied for. Thank you.
So, no, just to build on what we said, normally if there was a commercial side to the activity. So, for example, if we had a complaint that somebody was breeding from a house, a domestic dwelling, they're breeding dogs there. The picture I showed you at the end with the puppies in the living room, the dogs in the living room, that was somebody that was breeding from a commercial establishment, more than 3 litters in 12 months. She had more than three breeding bitches. Therefore, we were able to prove that, and we were able to prove the threshold. And we applied for the warrant, and the warrant was granted by the district judge. So if there's a commercial aspect to their business, so if they are breeding without a licence, then we can put the intelligence together and we can put the picture together, and then we can obtain a licence if there's an offence for our legislation. If we are looking at, as Lisa said, somebody next door is leaving their boxer dog outside and there's no commercial aspect to it, then historically the local authority always said, that's not us, we don't get involved if it's non-commercial. In the same way as they wouldn't get involved with horses unless it was on a commercial, on a farm or on a riding establishment, a commercial side to it. However, that's become more and more blurred because of the number of people breeding, I think. And I think that's why we've become more involved in getting warrants in domestic dwellings. The warrant we obtained last week, we had that for a domestic dwelling. We had to jump through hoops. We're not just giving it, it's people's right to a private life. We are breaching their human rights when we go into their domestic dwelling. There is no piece of legislation that's ever going to grant us power of entry into a domestic dwelling. Some of my colleagues nationally will argue that under the Animal Health Act, because it doesn't state domestic dwelling, that we do have the power of entry. I would always argue that the Human Rights Act is going to override that, and we're not going to have that power of entry. If we want to go into a domestic dwelling on a farm, because if we think that farm has got items or the cattle passports or any aspect is being kept in the domestic dwelling, then we can give them 24 hours notice and we can go in there that way. But we're inside somebody's house then, and that it does become more invasive. So when we apply to the court for the warrant, it makes it a lot easier because we can then search everywhere looking for what we're looking for. Because otherwise, if you're going in there and they're giving you their permission to go in, then it makes it pretty difficult to start looking through their drawers if they stood there, because they will tend to want to do that. So sometimes it all depends on the offence, the evidence that you've got, the level of culpability, and then we would look at getting the warrant to go in there to just get everything. So, for example, the warrant we did last week, we literally went in and we've removed everything and we'll bring it back and we'll search through it all later.
From what you're saying, it sounds to me that in domestic premises, a single dog or a single cat being badly treated doesn't have much legislative protection, from what you're saying, I think. And, although the RSPCA may investigate, it sounds as if they haven't got any real powers to do anything about it, which is, I find, quite surprising, actually. I mean, I don't have a dog or a cat myself, but I mean, I do think that sounds like there's a big gap there.
Definitely. And I think it comes back to that statutory element and the fact that, originally, when the 2006 Act came out, it was pushed for it to be statutory. But for it to be statutory, you would have had to have funding come with it. And unfortunately, that's often where things fall down. But in extreme circumstances, the police will be the first port of call because, there's evidence there to show now that people who abuse animals inevitably will go on to abuse, humans. And that's something that...
Just a very quick comment, if I can, and enjoying Councillor Brown's comments. As an animal owner and an animal lover, with you, I'm completely surprised the RSPCA has no powers. I thought, in inverted commas, they were the animal police. And like you said, Zoe, if they turn up with a badge, then you think, it's like a police officer knocking on your door. And I'm surprised and amazed. And I don't know which political side of the fence wants to get them to have more powers. But like you say, there is a gap there, isn't there?
Can I just come back at that though? Because they are a non-statutory organisation, and this is my argument. Always will be, is that I had this all-parliamentary group for animal welfare in Parliament recently. They raised the same thing, and I said, well, shouldn't you just adequately resource the statutory enforcers rather than giving powers to somebody else? Because what's happened in Scotland is they gave the SSPCA limited powers 2 years ago, and 2 years later they're now saying they can't afford to do it, and they now they're going to be knocking on the door of government now to fund that, aren't they? So my issue is, why don't you just adequately resource the statutory enforcers?
Okay, yes, we are in a meeting, guys. Yes, right, okay, so are we all happy with that now? I could add that my dog has many names, many lives, and she rules our lives, so she is the boss in our house, fear not. Right, okay, we need... Yes, Rob wants to say
just
something.
very quickly, Councillor Dimmock asked in the chat if it's possible to share the presentation. Is that something that can we do that, Gareth, or is there any reason why we couldn't do that? Just to share it with the members by email, would that be okay? That's great, thank you. If you send it to me, and I can send it on. Thank you.
And I think this is obviously a huge subject. Perhaps we should come back with a slightly more focused thought. Emma wanted to say something.
And that's what I was going to suggest. That I think it is a really good idea that you proposed that you speak to all county councillors, so that we understand fully exactly what it is you can do and how we can assist, and when we should come to you and when not. Really,
yeah,
it would really be helpful.
Yeah, I do think there is an opportunity to broaden this and perhaps condense it a little so it's bullet pointed. Yeah, but then allow people to ask the questions, because then it covers everything. That's just my own take on it. But yeah, I think it's really good.
Sorry, could I just add, we are always happy to accept any information, because without information coming in from anybody, general public or whatever, then we do not know what's going on out there. So we record everything on our intelligence database. And I'm a massive advocate for that, because it's people cross boundaries, it's shared across the whole of the country. So we will always record any information that's passed to us. More than happy to take it.
So perhaps we could ask our very wonderful Rob here if he would arrange in the future, going forward, perhaps a few months down the line, an evening thing that we can do, a workshop, and invite everybody. Would that be okay with you two, Gareth and Susie? Yeah, wonderful. Right, okay. Thank you ever so much for coming in. Thank you. Right, the next thing, Cabinet Work Planner. Oh yeah, sorry. Item 6, Place Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Planner and Action List. Rob?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. The action list included this business about getting a list of surplus assets for us to look at for future scrutiny. That has actually come through while we were in this meeting, so I'll send it on, and then we can talk perhaps by email, because there's a bit of a gap between now and the next meeting as to whether there's anything in there that we wanted to drill down on, which we could potentially programme for that meeting maybe, because it's the next one, but we've got a bit of a gap because it's in May, so that's possible. So we perhaps do that by email and see where we end up.
Okay.
If that's...
Okay, so if anybody's got anything burning that wants to bring forward, to raise it. Item 7, Cabinet and... Councillor Brown.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't seen any email or anything on it.
No, so I mean, it's come to me just while we were in the meeting, and so I'll send it on to you subsequently.
I see, yeah. I mean, I think whatever it says, I think it would be still useful if we, have a discussion with the estate officer on what's going on with regard to the various assets, because although people might know what's going on in their particular ward, we don't necessarily know what's going on across Monmouthshire, and I think that would be useful to just have that sort of verbal update as well as whatever you've got in your email. Thank you.
Actually, you're right. We did ask Nick to come back, didn't we? So can we arrange that? Can we arrange something for Nick, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, there was some back and forth about whether to start with the email with the list to then, if the scrutiny wanted to be focused in any particular way, but yeah. So if I send the email, then we can have that discussion. But it's certainly, yeah. But, we've got a gap in the next couple of meetings for these things, so we can program something in, I'm sure.
Okay. Item 7, Cabinet and Council Work Planner. I think we upset everybody's work planner somewhat, but so just to note, so please be aware and pay attention to what comes through. I'm finding it very helpful having the Cabinet forward planners sent. I don't know if anybody else is. It's proven to be very helpful to me. Item 8, to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody got any thoughts about the minutes of the last meeting? No. No, take that as a read, and we're happy with those. And I'm very pleased to say the next meeting is the 21st of May. See you all then soon. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you very much for everybody. And I'm not sure if I said thank you very much to the officers earlier on for attending, so I'd like to publicly say thank you. I know it was a very difficult meeting today, so cheers everybody. Thank you.